Ladies and gentlemen, we are most honored to be able to host this event, and we would like to convey our gratitude to the webinar participants for taking the time to participate in today's webinar. This webinar is especially aimed at facilitating discussions between wider public policymakers and other key stakeholders on how to implement a sustainable post-COVID-19 recovery. The webinar also aims to discuss the context and current issues of G20, stock-taking important and continued issues from the previous G20 Presidency, as well as identifying the future G20 and or T20 commitments and ideas. Today, we will have 3 sessions, which will last until 4:30 p.m. Ladies and gentlemen, honorable guests, we wish you all a very fruitful and productive webinar. First of all, we would like to invite the Acting Dean of Faculty of Economics and Business, Pak Teguh Dartanto, PhD, to deliver his welcoming remarks. Pak Teguh, the floor is yours.
The screen is yours, Pak Teguh.
Okay, thank you very much, Sean. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon for everyone. Excellency Professor Swasil Nasara, Vice Minister of Finance Republic of Indonesia, Bapak Rizal Lukman Afandi, Bapak Rizal Afandi Lukman, Deputy for International Economic Cooperation, Coordinating Ministry of Economic Affairs, Nicola from Global Solution Initiative, distinguished speaker, Ibu Nela, Senior Economist ADBI on Capacity Building and Training, Bapak Jose Rizal Damuri, Head of Economics Department CSIS, Bapak Ricky Persik, President Commissioner of ITDC, Mbak Tita Larasati from Indonesia Creative Cities Network and Institute Teknologi Bandung, and also from Indonesian Young Academy of Sciences, Bapak Ibrahim Khalilur Rahman, Head of Samudra Indonesia Research Initiative, PT Samudra Indonesia. Pak Ibrahim is my good friend during we are in undergraduate. Ibu Elika Paula from ASEAN Secretariat, Fauzia Zain from Senior Economist area. My colleagues from LPM, FEBUI, and participants of this webinar. I am delighted to welcome all of you to this webinar on intersecting sustainably ways to implement post-COVID-19 recovery conducted by LPM FEBUI in light of Intersecting book launch from Global Solution Initiative in last March. This webinar will discuss perspective and ideas on policies priorities to tackle changing and evolving problem facing by societies in these challenging periods caused by pandemic COVID-19. The COVID-19 pandemic has reversed march on economics and social SDGs progress already made. It has also brought a disproportionate impact not only within the country, among group of the population, but also on the global context, given existing condition recovery paths might likely to be different across countries. Therefore, coordinated policy responses are needed not only within its specific country, but also at the regional and the global context. Indonesia, as an emerging country, need to take advantage of multilateral cooperations, given fragmented solution might not be adequate to eradicate COVID-19 pandemic and to have a relatively fast economic recovery. The timing of G20 Indonesia Presidency in 2022 surely opened a policy window to force and strengthen multilateral cooperation to create a global commitment that is more inclusive in order to sustain a long-term and sustainable economic development. For example, priorities in supporting small, medium enterprises and the ecosystem of the creative economy might need to also address issue on unequal uneven digital infrastructure, or we call that digital divide. Furthermore, cross-borders data cooperation is presumed aligned with the effort to reassess what element needed for a working regional value chains. I greatly appreciate speakers that will share and discuss perspective on the priorities, policies, and opportunities of the cooperation post-COVID-19 pandemic. I hope the discussion in this webinar can initiate and gather new ideas, as well as to get the feedback on the existing policy making, including addressing limitation on the policy option. We are lucky to have here with us Professor Suhasil Nazara, Vice Minister of Finance, who will give keynote speech on the issues alongside with the Bapak Rizal Afandi Lukman from the Coordinating Ministry of the Economic Affairs. On behalf of the Faculty of Economics and Business Universitas Indonesia, I wish to all speakers and participants of this webinar a fruitful discussion and a joyful webinar. I hope the discussion will bring opportunities of forward-looking research collaborations addressing issues discussed in this webinar session. Thank you very much and enjoy the webinar. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam, Pak Teguh. Thank you for your remarks. Now, to formally open the webinar, we would like to invite His Excellency Professor Suhasil Nazara, Vice Minister of Finance, the Republic of Indonesia, to deliver his keynote address. Professor Suhasil, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, John. And it is my privilege to be here. And I would like to thank the organizer, the LPM FABUE, I should say, for holding this seminar with the clear idea about what should we do in the post-COVID-19, for the post-COVID-19 recovery. I will use my time now to speak to all of you and relate to you some of the logic that are discussed within the government and how the government of Indonesia actually approach the situation. And it will be, I hope it can serve as a background to your later discussion this afternoon. I'm very happy to see a lot of speakers and also moderators who are, I believe, very knowledgeable about not only the economic theory and concepts, but some of you are really part of the government's and Indonesia's effort to mitigate and try to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we all know the pandemic has already taught us several lessons despite its 1-year-old pandemic. But we already have some very important lessons from this pandemic. Of course, the pandemic is spreading very, very fast. A year ago, nobody can expect that we will be in this kind of situation. Right now, worldwide, it is very big number of people that already been infected. 164 million people infected by COVID. 3.4 million people died. It's a huge amount of grievances. It's a huge amount of misery throughout the world. For the Indonesian case, the number of cumulative infections already reached 1.7 million people, and the number of deaths in Indonesia is around 48,000 people already died from this one. And that is, I think, the first lesson. The pandemic is spreading out very, very fast. Lessons number 2, I think, from this pandemic is that the second lesson is that there are waves. It is not one of pandemic and then after that it's gone. It's a pandemic, it's an increasing number of infections, and then it can go down. But then watch very carefully, it can go up again. So this is a lesson that any country should take, that is, whenever you have a low infections, daily infections, it doesn't mean that the COVID is on its way out. I think Indonesia is also on that situation. Right now, we believe that in Indonesia there is a slowing down, but if we learn our lessons, if we learn the global lessons, there is no guarantee that slowing down pandemic in Indonesia means it will never go up again. We have to be very, very careful. We still have to be very, very cautious to keep it down. That means several activity that we have to do is very, very important. The health protocols, vaccinations are going to be very, very important. And of course, Indonesia, we try to secure the vaccinations right from the beginning. We know that Indonesia, we still cannot produce vaccines, but we have to secure our supply of vaccines. And the daily vaccination progress, I think we really hope that with the enough supply of vaccines right now, it's going to increase the daily vaccination progress. Indonesia will increase in months, weeks, and months to come. Now, of course, one of the most important, before we have the vaccines, and even now, before we had the vaccines and even now, one way to very effective way to curb the infections is to keep people from the physical distance, stop people from working in the crowds. Since March last year, Indonesia practices going from work from home, school from home, even do our religious affairs from home. And of course, this has its toll in the sense that it curbs the economic growth. Economic activities being restricted, consumption decline, investment decline, export and imports are also decline. And we know that in this kind of situation, it is very, can we go to slide, what number is this? The growth. I think this is slide number 8. Yeah. Okay. So the economic went down very, very heavily, very severely. Indonesia, which used to be at the level of 5% economic growth, we suffered in the second quarter last year minus 5%, from positive 5% to minus 5% in our severe period. And of course, it is a pressure by the COVID. And right from the beginning, we understand that because of the COVID restrictions, consumption will go down, investment will go down, export import will go down. In that situation, the only support for the economic growth is the government expenditures. So government expenditures must increase. Government expenditures is the only, can we go to the next slide? Government expenditures is the only variable that are positive in the quarter starting in the third quarter of last year. Investment is negative, consumption is negative, export, import were under pressures. So government consumption out of the budget is the way that is supporting the economy. So if we go to the slide number, this is slide number 15, when the COVID pandemic is pressing down the economic growth, the state budget and the national economic recovery programs is actually the support from below. The slide is gone, yes. So this is a way to illustrate what is happening now. COVID-19 pandemic is putting pressures on economic growth to go down, and the budget is the one that is supporting it from below, so that we did not go lower than -5 in second quarter, and all year of 2020, we have an economic contraction of -2.1. Let me give you a perspectives on how the state budget actually doing this. The state budget is actually doing this kind of support by expanding our budget deficits. Indonesia, who is used to be maximum 3% of GDP budget deficits, have to expand our budget deficits to 6.1% last year. That means we have to mobilize financing. And it's a huge one. It's a huge amount of financing last year and also this year. But that kind of financing is used to support the economic growth from below. Now, let me give you a perspectives, a little bit of international perspectives about the relationship between growth and deficits. In Indonesia, our growth last year is contraction to 4.1%. And then it is out of the deficit of 6.1%. Japan last year contracted 4.8% with a deficit which is much larger than Indonesia, 12.6%. Our neighbor, Philippines, contraction last year, 9.5% economic growth. Deficits, 5.5%. And Malaysia contraction 5.6% out of the deficits of 5.1%. Now, I can say that with that perspective, Indonesian strategy to expand the deficit to 6.1%, and then we were able to support the economic growth last year at the level of 2.1%, is a strategy that is quite moderate and quite successful in maintaining our economic growth. Now, of course, the way to go is to make sure that how can we improve the economy? How can we improve the economy so that the economic growth can go back to the normal path? For this 2021, for this year, 2021, I always believe that there are three game changers for Indonesia. The first game changer for Indonesia is, of course, the health intervention. It is very important to bear in mind that the source of all problems at this time is the health issue. So it is very important that we improve the health situation. It is, I think I do have a slide about the game changer. Let me find it. This is not the slide that I meant to show. Yeah, okay. So it is very important that we understand that the source of all problem is the health issue. So it is very important that the health intervention continues to be on top of our priority. And of course, one area of this health intervention is vaccination. It is very important to vaccinate. Vaccination program is very important. We are aiming at 181.5 million people of Indonesia being vaccinated. It is not a small number. Do not compare us with Singapore. Singapore population is way much below us. Indonesia, with a vast geography, with a very tricky logistics, we have to vaccinate 181.5 million to achieve herd immunity. It is a task, it's a massive task, but we should be up to that. That is the first game changer of 2021. Health intervention, primarily vaccination program. Number two, the second game changer is the survival and recovery kit out of the flexible budget. This is social protection program for the bottom 40 and the vulnerable groups. it is also maintaining the support for business continuity, especially for the micro, small, and medium enterprises. And you will be able to see the government program on these two areas. Number three, the third game changer for Indonesia is the structural reform. It is very important that we are not only surviving the crisis, we are not only surviving the COVID pandemic, but along the way, we continue to improve our structural reform. It is important to stay safe and stay healthy, but it is more important to make sure that once we are out of this pandemic, or as the pandemic starts to go lower, we should be working with a new economic landscape of Indonesia. This is really what sometimes we said that do not waste the crisis. Do not waste the crisis. That's why we continue with our reform. We are creating job creation law, the omnibus law of job creation, and the job creation law is a basis for structural reform a lot in Indonesia. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you ask me what is the post-COVID strategy for economic for the recovery, I really think there are these three. This game changer will be the basic foundations of our recovery program. Health intervention, flexible budget for survival and recovery kit, and the structural reform. For us in this year, for the 2021, we are doing these three game changers, and I believe next year we are also going to be around that the similar kind of logic that we have to maintain. For this year, I can give you some microeconomic indicators that we go to slide number, this is 22, page 22, which gives you some microeconomic indicators that we use in the formulation of Indonesian budget. It is just announced this morning that the 2022 numbers are going to be as you see on the slide. So we expect that the economic growth will be, this year will be between 4.5 to 5.3, and next year we should be able to gain the momentum to 5.2 to 5.8. Inflation will be around the same, exchange rate and other microeconomic indicators you will see over there. Now, very important for the economy is to make sure that we have a good balance or a good turnout on the growth, which is not government. After the budget has been working very hard to serve as a support to the economic growth, at some point we must go with fiscal consolidation. Can we go to two slides after this, 24? So fiscal consolidation should become our next homework. Last year, Indonesian, the deficits in the budget has already achieved 1,000 trillion rupiah. This year is also going to be another 1,000 trillion Indonesian rupiah. It's a huge amount. And at some point, we must come back to make sure our budget back to the healthy life. Fiscal consolidation is very important. And for this fiscal consolidation, we have to conduct reforms on the revenues, reforms on the expenditures, and reforms in the financing strategy. These three are now very, very heavy focus of us in the Ministry of Finance, and I'm more than happy to elaborate further in different occasions. But if you read the today's document that are submitted to the Parliament by the government, which is called the Microeconomic Conditions and Principles of Fiscal Framework for 2022, you will see these three items are discussed very heavily in that document. And of course, my last point, which I would like to elaborate here, is the game changer number 3, which is the structural reform. For the structural reform, Indonesia, we believe that our long-term issues, I think it can be described on the page, what page is this? 26. The issue of human capital, issue in infrastructure, the bureaucracy. Can we go to, 28, slide number 28. The human capital, infrastructure development, bureaucracy reform, regulatory framework, and economic, which is leading to the economic transformations. I can, if you look at this and you feel that, well, Pa, it's a classic. It's already, we know it already for decades. This is Indonesia's problem. Exactly, we haven't solved this problem. That is the reason why we have to keep on mentioning this. Human capital development is very important. Infrastructure is very important. Institutional development is never been more important for Indonesia, because these are the basics, the foundations of our economic transformation. And I believe that the omnibus law on job creation address some of that, and some other are addressed in different other policies for Indonesia. In the next slide, I just would like to show you that despite our effort to curb and mitigate the risk of this pandemic, within the government, we never been out of the focus for medium and long-term problems. Because if we only carried out by the short-term problems, we are losing the medium and long-term issues. The medium and long-term issues for Indonesia is still there, and it is still our job. And that is the reason why the omnibus law on job creation is developed, and a lot, I think, can be discussed later, items for the items on the job creation law. Now, we expect that Indonesian stories can become, can be discussed and can be shared in different G20 forums. I believe that the G20 forums will have so many issues, and I believe that colleagues from the academia as well as from the Ministry of Finance are very keen to engage in the many G20 forums, as Indonesia is heading toward the presidency in 2022. And we hope that in 2022, our G20 presidency can leave some marks for the global economy that is recovering stronger and recovering together. And of course, stories must be exchanged, new developments should be anticipated, and a lot of the previous discussion on the G20, I think will be very, very, can we go to slide number 34? The stories about crisis management, the international financial architecture, international trade, infrastructure development, international taxation, and strengthening global partnership are going to be very, very crucial for in many of the G20 venues. Pak Rizal Afandi Lukman, from my colleague from the Coordinating Ministry of Economy, is the Indonesian Sherpa so far, and has been very, very engaged with a lot of issues in the G20, and I believe he will be able to share with you all some of the G20 initiatives and discussions from Indonesia as well. Let me stop here. I think I already been past my allotted time, but I really hope that what I explained earlier can become the background of what Indonesia has already been doing, and some of our logic, strategy, conceptual framework, some indicators that I show you earlier, especially for this year and next year, and also for the medium and long-term aspirations for Indonesia. So have a fruitful discussions, everyone, and I hope that we will be able to meet sometime in the future. Stay safe and have a good discussions this afternoon. Thank you very much. Back to you, Sian.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Suhasil, for the keynote address. Next, we would like to invite Dr. Rizal Afandi Lukman, Deputy for International Economic Cooperation Coordination, the Republic of Indonesia, to deliver his keynote address. Pak Rizal, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Pak Zen, for the opportunity. Yang kami hormati Bapak Wamenkeu, Profesor Suhasil, Pak Teguh, Dean of Economic and Business Faculty of Indonesia, Ibu Riatu, the Director of LPM, Faculty Economic and Business Faculty of Economic University of Indonesia, as well as Mr. Nicola from the Global Solution Initiative, as well as my colleague from different line ministry as well as institutions. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Peace be upon us. A very good afternoon to everyone, to Bapak, Ibu, and participants of this webinar event. In this opportunity, I'd like to welcome and thanks to University of Indonesia, who have been collaboratively working together with Global Solution Initiative and other institutions to organize this event in order to support the discussion on Indonesian G20 Presidency in 2022, as well as to all panelists and participants from various agencies. It is a privilege for me to be able to join with you virtually today, and I'm grateful to have the opportunity to deliver this remark in this very important webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, all participants, I appreciate the theme that has been raised by the organizer in today's event, a sustainable way to implement post-COVID-19 recovery. So we can go over to the next slide, please. It gives us a positive impression and expectation that this pandemic coming to an end, as well as we all hope amidst the global cases trend that has begun to pick up again, driven by an increase in cases in the ASEAN region, especially in India. Our neighbors, Singapore, Malaysia, have been also performing the lockdown policy to control the increased COVID-19 daily cases in their countries. Meanwhile, Indonesia has been experiencing a downward trend of daily confirmed cases in the last few weeks, but it is necessary to be also conscious of the potential increase in active cases after the implementation of the long holiday last week. Ladies and gentlemen, all participants, the effect of the COVID-19 pandemic has been devastating worldwide, explained by Professor Suhasil earlier. Aside from global health and social problems, the pandemic also brought down the global GDP. Indonesia has experienced a minus 2.07% growth for 2020, although it was relatively modest contraction compared to regional peers and G20 economies, thanks to mainly to national economic recovery intervention from the fiscal side as well as from the monetary side. In the first quarter 2021, Indonesia recorded a minus 0.74% of the GDP growth. However, in line with the positive expectation, we want to share through this event that our economic performance in the second quarter 2021 is estimated to be positive growth. Furthermore, the projection of Indonesia economic growth in 2021 from several international institutions range from 4.3% to 4.9%, while we are also more confident by forecasting GDP growth in the range of 4.5% to 5.3%. COVID-19 pandemic has become a health and humanitarian crisis in this century, affecting all sectors of human life. The impact have spread to the social, economic, and even financial sectors. Government has been carefully implemented the balanced policy to overcome health and economic impact of this pandemic. This policy can be illustrated as a gas and brake pedal in our car. We need to keep the gas pedal in order to maintain the livelihood of our people, as well as continuously monitoring health situation by using the brake pedal. Once the cases are increasing, then we need to step on the brakes to suppress the COVID-19 contagion. We need to maintain the balance of the utilization of this mechanism to achieve a healthy community and sound economic growth. And also, I'd like to mention the statement made by Mr. Dennis Snower as the president of the Global Solution Initiative in his introduction to the book Intersecting. He mentioned that the urgent need for holistic approach for addressing the global challenges is very, very important. And also I share his views that currently, because of the decoupling of the economic and social progress, as well as also the coupling of technological and environmental progress, and decoupling of societal progress, wealth, and health are main factors fostering global crisis. So that's why we need to work comprehensively and from the fiscal, from the monetary side, as well as elaborated by Professor Suhasil, we also need to do our structural reform to complete on the leading to the global economic recovery. The pandemic remains our greatest challenges, both on our economy and our health sector. After going through a rough start in 2020, Indonesia is now experiencing positive trends toward economic recovery. In 2020, we were able to overcome the spread of COVID-19. We were able to protect the purchasing power of the poor and the vulnerable society, and maintain the sustainability of the business world, including micro and small medium enterprises. In 2021, Indonesia is upbeat, but we need to remain vigilant so that the pandemic can be controlled and socio-economic activities will continue to recover. As President Joko Widodo stated, we all have to be optimistic that the beginning of 2021 will be a turning point for the pandemic problem. And I do agree to the three factors affecting, as regarded by Professor Suhasil, as the game changers in overcoming the current challenges, which is on the health intervention, as well as on the survival and recovery for protecting the society, as well as the maintaining the business community, and lastly on the structural reform. As we may all aware, Indonesia will hold the G20 Presidency starting December this year. As a global premier forum, G20 reflecting 85% of global GDP, 75% of international trade, and 2/3 of world population. It is indeed will be very important opportunity for Indonesia to show its leadership in international fora, especially in the post-pandemic recovery stages. G20 has shown its global leadership in responding crisis, starting from 1998, continuing to year 2008-2009. Not only the financial crisis, but also health and humanitarian crisis like COVID-19 pandemic. There are several concrete initiatives that has been launched by G20 to manage the pandemic and help the countries impacted by this pandemic. Meanwhile, in the regional level, we also have an ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework that consists of broad strategies in order to recover the pandemic. G20 Indonesia Presidency next year has significance and strategic value, among others, supporting post-pandemic global economic recovery, which is, I think, very much in line with the main theme of this webinar, taking part in determining the direction of the post-crisis global economy, including the stability of the international financial system. Showcasing the success of Indonesia's structural and financial reform amid the pandemic, as well as also seeking international support for the priority agenda of the Indonesian government and generating income for local economy. And hopefully by the time next year, the COVID-19 pandemic has gone, then most of the meeting will be conducted in the physical. Then it will be spread out the venue of the event in the major cities in Indonesia. G20 Indonesia Presidency next year is an opportunity to give added value to the G20 as a multilateral forum. We aspire to work together for stronger recovery. We look forward to ensuring that the G20 remains relevant to address crisis. We will strengthen the G20 instruments to make the forum more adaptive to future shocks. G20 Indonesia Presidency will emphasize on promoting global collaboration to support stronger and more resilient recovery. This endeavor will be achieved through devoting our focus on some of the key aspects and issues such as productivity, resiliency, and stability, as well as sustainable and inclusive growth. We expect issues of global importance such as digitalization, human capital, also including energy transition and multilateralism will be the main cross-cutting discussion next year. Ladies and gentlemen, all participants, what we will discuss in G20 Indonesia Presidency next year will not be far from our national agenda. The pandemic provides the opportunity to carry out our structural reform. Last year, we have launched the Omnibus Law on job creation to unlock potential investment and create more jobs. The law is an instrument to support post-pandemic recovery and sustain national development agenda. It is aimed at a better business environment through reducing red tapes, improving ease of doing business, ensuring sustainable practices, and upholding workers' rights. The government believes that we need to make various efforts so that citizens can exercise the right to work and make decent living. That is one of the reasons the government of Indonesia is actively attracting investment. For example, the establishment of sovereign wealth fund, Indonesia Investment Authority, and continuously improving business climate, which will allow for greater employment opportunities for our people. Indeed, Indonesia has signed in the G20 as among the few countries who were able to enact such sweeping circular reform package despite the current crisis. As a country characterized by diversity and abundant natural resources, Indonesia has put a strong commitment to preserve our natural, especially through sustainability and climate change mitigation agenda. Indonesia has committed to achieving sustainable development goals, Paris Agreement, and the post-2020 biodiversity framework. In climate change, Indonesia has set unconditional reduction of emission target of 29% on the business as usual scenario and conditional reduction target up to 41% with international support by 2030. Indonesia also remains committed to protecting the existence of our biodiversity as a state asset for the present and the future by imposing Indonesia biodiversity strategy and action plan. The COVID-19 pandemic is severely impacting global economies, especially developing and low-income countries, reversing progress toward the Sustainable Development Goals and reducing available resources to finance crisis mitigation, recovery measures, and development as general. Placing Indonesia economy into green and sustainable development pathway as stated in the National Long-Term Development Plan will require large mobilization of investment. Large portion of this investment needed in critical infrastructure, as well as environmentally sensitive areas such as agriculture, forestry, energy, and mining. In addition, financing for SMEs and industry is critical for creating jobs and boosting productivity. Indonesian government has begun to take steps on initiating the implementation of alternative financing, as well as sustainable, innovative, and green financing. With limited fiscal space caused by pandemic, Indonesia is leading country in the implementation of blended finance. This method provides strategic use of development finance for the mobilization of additional finance towards sustainable development in developing countries. Ladies and gentlemen, as 2022 will be a crucial year, we in Indonesia, as well as with other G20 members, must transform crisis management into opportunities to grow stronger. Collaboration is undeniably needed as we have yet to survive this crisis. As the UN Secretary General highlights, the G20 should be in the primary driving seat to navigate the post-pandemic world, and all eyes will be on Indonesia next year. Once again, I thank the City of Indonesia for organizing this event and encourage to create more events like this in order to provide additional thought from pandemic for academic perspective for G20 Presidency next year. And also I acknowledge the presence of my colleague Pak Jose Rizal from the Think 20 that always support the government of Indonesia in providing some insight as well as also views, thought on the current challenges and what we have to do. Finally, I wish you all a fruitful discussion. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam, Pak Rizal Effendi. Thank you for the keynote address. Next, we would like to invite Mr. Nicolas Bouchou, Global Solutions Fellow and President of the Grand Paris Alliance for Metropolitan Development, to deliver his remarks on the background of the Intersecting book, which presents the impact of COVID-19 on multiple aspects a year after the emergence of the pandemic. Mr. Nicolas Bouchou, the floor is yours. I think your mic is still muted.
Yeah. So can you see my screen?
Yep, I can see
thank you. Thank you very much. I wish to thank dearly the Faculty of Economics of University of Indonesia for not only contributing to Intersecting through Riyatu and Teuku Rifki, but for setting up this very important discussion today, and welcome also very much the very important and substantial keynotes from the Vice Minister of Finance, Sherpa of the G20, and acting Dean of the Faculty of Economics. What I just wanted to give to share with you today is a few insights about this work, Intersecting, which provides the ground for our meeting today, right? As a fellow of the Global Solutions Initiative, I've suggested like intensely in the spring of 2020, as the pandemic was striking hard, and we didn't know where we were heading, and as cities across the globe, from France to Indonesia and so on, were in lockdown and we were in confinement, and we really didn't know what was happening. And I first felt that we were not really prepared to meet such a challenge, right? So this was raising many questions for our daily lives, for the future, but also more profoundly, why were we collectively so little prepared? Now it seems obvious, right? We have learned to adapt and so on. But a few months ago, it was not that obvious. And this raises questions also about the level of preparedness, but also deeper issues maybe about knowledge building and policy making. Of course, crises cannot always be anticipated and expected, but this one, there were many early signs that a pandemic like this could happen and that it would have very far-reaching consequences, right, on us, on lives, on the economy, and so on, and even on institutions. But still, despite the abundance of knowledge institutions, think tanks, and so on, very little anticipation was done. One reason we thought, and this was maybe the starting point of a series of dialogues that would then lead to the publication of Intersecting, one reason was a lack of investments in capacity building, social infrastructure, social capital, something that goes beyond just the economic figures of more growth, more added value, more capital, more interconnectivity, more containers being shipped by boats, and so on and so on and so on. So, and it appears that in the last decade, especially after the crisis of 2008, which really lead to the G20 as a multilateral forum of leaders, right? There has been a decade of underinvestment in social capital and social infrastructure. And the growth, I am simplifying, of course, but somehow the choices to save the international banking system after 2008 and to support growth has been mostly about infrastructure for growth and about organizing the international monetary system and the prudential banking system, and very little about supporting people, and very little about supporting the development of social capital. And this has had consequences not only at a global scale, but also in cities. On the one hand, you can see like thriving cities with high-rise buildings, etc. But on the other hand, when you look in the detail, when you look in how the cities work, you can find that across the globe, be it in so-called developed, emerging, lower-income countries, many cities, urban areas, metropolitan areas are plagued with inequalities. And those inequalities have become quasi-systemic. And those inequalities have profoundly fragilized the foundations of many political institutions at national or regional level. And this is the background context, which also allowed for the pandemic to become a new reality so swiftly. So instead of just guessing and thinking that we could develop some understanding just by ourselves, we organized a series of dialogues. We mobilized contributors for those dialogues from spring to autumn of 2020. And the material was so rich that we decided we could not let that go. And we decided to spend much more time than was anticipated into gathering further contributions. And I remember my first meeting in that regard with LPEM was during the time of between Christmas and New Year, right? And we had a very, very important and interesting meeting. And then Mariatu and Teuku and the team from LPEM agreed also to participate. So we aggregated a lot of content and we decided to publish in the form of a book. And this process, in fact, will lead to a second edition of Intersecting. So what we are talking about is still a process under consolidation. We will edit a digital version and a paper version for the summit of the G20 in October 2021. And I hope that colleagues, I'm thinking here about Jose Rizal, can join us for the second edition. And there will be then a cycle of intersecting research with the same aspects of crossing the lines between scales of government and between spheres of issues up until 2023 with two priorities that have been already decided: circular economy and multilateral agenda, and the completion of the 2030 agenda. So I just want to very, very briefly give you a series of insights of what we have tried to deal with. One aspect of intersecting, which is very unusual in reports and other, I would say, more official documents, is that we have also gathered original photographic material, right? Not generic illustrations, you know, with cryptograms, etc., but real people, real situation, real photos, which we spend a lot of time curating as part of the editorial work, and makes also a lot of sense. So it's not just a written contribution and written document. This also works in a visual manner, so that it opens up new ways and alternative avenues, including practically in terms of cognitive issues, to think about the pandemic. Mostly Intersecting has been built as a collective compass for recovery. It was mentioned in the opening keynotes about all the strategies that government, starting with the government of Indonesia, has been put into place, right? To put back the economy on track, but also to think about budget balance and so on. And there are so many other aspects that would allow recovery to take place or not: social aspects, health issues, basic conditions, local agendas, multilateral agendas, and so on. So we try to circulate among these different notions. And instead of finding solutions or saying some solutions, as so many like advisory companies like the Big Fours in the spring, in the first half of 2020, they all issued reports about the recovery will be about that, the situation is about that, the solutions will be A, B, C, D. We believe that the crisis illustrates more complex issues, and building a compass for recovery needs a little bit more careful observation of the issues and careful rearrangement. This was also mentioned in the opening keynotes. To rearrange also the conditions of growth in a different manner for the future. And of course, this all takes place in the background of ongoing transformations, right? Which also do have an impact on our individual and collective abilities to think about recovery options and to implement them. What energy do we have, but also how far can we go, because we will be facing also like mounting consequences of global challenges such as climate change, for example. So conceptually, it's very seducing and tempting, but when we are dealing with that in reality, you can see that it will require a lot of energy, but also a lot of alignment and convergence to meet the challenge that we collectively have contributed to create, even beyond the sole health issue linked with the pandemic. And so here is how it looks like. It's a series of five chapters with 3 entry points for each of them. And you can see that when you start to circulate, for example, from infrastructure, not just infrastructure investment per se, but what are the impacts on inclusion and distribution, for example, this is already become more interesting and maybe more complex. But then if you connect that with knowledge and you connect that with issues such as not only prosperity, but the level of informality in the global economy, especially in cities, then you can see that the public health responses to the disease, which is the starting point of everything here, will require different inputs, macroeconomic inputs, but also social, societal inputs. It was mentioned, I think, by Pak Rizal about the creative economy agenda, right? These are ways that have not been here on multilateral agendas linked with growth in the past years, but should be there to meet system change solutions in regional and multilateral agendas. So when you circulate, right, like this, it brings up new sets of ideas and new avenues and new possibilities also to recombine issues to reach out to policy solutions, because intersecting and this work and the engagement of so many stakeholders, and Tita Larrazati, who is here, was an important contributor, and Ricky Pesik also, and I'm mentioning Nella Andrietti, who has been also very, very supportive, also with the Asian Development Bank Institute. Everything like this has been important, but intersecting is also a way to rethink about policymaking. It's not a philosophical work. It's not an essay about the conditions of human living in the 21st century. It is focusing ultimately, and this is all about the chapter 5, about systems, solutions, and agendas. And therefore, we are talking about coalitions between governments, but also coalitions between governments and civil society. And we can see that this is not so obvious when the society is shaking. Sometimes government tend to be more severe or more strict. And this happens everywhere in non-democratic countries and in democratic countries too. So that's one aspect of the issue. Then there is the issue of cities and how to work in very multi-stakeholder, cross-stakeholder approach to drive inclusive growth. This is an important issue also that needs to be tackled, not just by city and municipal governments, but also at a global level, especially starting in the G20 context. There is this very important, I like this photo from 1976. The more you are digging into the roots of the crisis, the more you can find that probably right now in these years, we are coming to the end, or we are exhausting a number of development models and institutional arrangements that have been created after the end of the Cold War in the early 90s. And even to some aspects, for example, environmental governance, sustainability that has been shaped in the beginning of the 70s, right? With the birth of the United Nations Environmental Program, and here as applied to urbanization with the Habitat First Summit in Vancouver. All these aspects we have been working with, dealing with, living with in the past 3 decades or in the past 5 decades. Now, somehow they are coming to an end, and we can see that something very different is ahead of us. Therefore, it's important to understand the conditions, so there's this background of the background, not on a philosophical standpoint, but also to reach us out to stronger policy changes and pragmatic institutional innovations in the context of now. And in this regard, in many ways, socially, economically, environmentally, institutionally, the cross-border cooperation that is happening in the space of Southeast Asia, right, across Indonesia, but in the space of Southeast Asia, and this is a very important lesson that has been brought up by Riatu Mariatun and Tiuku in their contributions to intersecting, is a way to connect digital and non-digital parts of the economy and leverage the economy out of the crisis in an inclusive and sustainable way. So these are some of the, not lessons, but some of the findings of intersecting that we are still very much working on, and that serve as drivers to think about and have transformed Intersecting from a series of dialogues a year ago into a book and now into a process that is fully part of the work of the Global Solutions Initiative and that even gets beyond. What we are doing now, as we are having this very important session today, in a few weeks from now, we will have an Intersecting India. It has been postponed a little bit because of the COVID-19 terrible situation in India. We are having similar discussions with colleagues in Central Asia, in Latin America. So this is expanding, and I really hope that the session of today will bring additional material that together with LPM we can include in the second edition of Intersecting that will be presented and introduced at the G20 Summit in Milano in October. So colleagues, thank you very much for listening, and thank you very much for, again, setting up this very important discussion today.
Thank you, Mr. Nicola, for your remarks. Now, before we proceed to the discussion sessions, we would like to invite His Excellency Professor Suhasil, Pak Rizal Afandi Lukman, and Mr. Nicola Bushu, and all of the speakers and moderators in the discussion session to open their camera for the group photo session. Now, I kindly ask Mas Fahmi to arrange the videos in order that proper group photos can be taken. Mas Fahmi, please indicate if the camera is ready.
Okay. Okay. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, Mas.
Okay. Thank you for all of the speakers and His Excellency Professor Suhasil, Pak Rizal Afandi, and Mr. Bushu. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we will proceed to the first session of the webinar, the G20 Overall Cooperation and Multilateralism. This session will last about 45 minutes and will discuss about the changing role and the importance of global connectivity as a new model of global growth in the coming decades. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Jahen Fahrul Reski to the stage. Mr. Jahen Reski obtained his PhD degree in economics from the University of York. His research interests are development economics, political economy, macroeconomy, and the economics of media. He has published academic articles in peer-reviewed journals such as the Journal of Southeast Asian Economies, Applied Health Economics and Health Policy, and Jurnal Ekonomi dan Pembangunan Indonesia, or as we know it, JEPI. Currently, Mr. Jahen Reski serves as Deputy Head of Business Climate and Global Value Chains of LPM FEB-UI and Associate Editor at the Economics and Finance in Indonesia Journal. Mr. Jahen, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Sean. Pak Suhasil Nazara, Bapak Rizal Afandi Lukman, Bapak Nicholas Bushu, and I hope I spell it correctly, Pak. And then Pak Teguh Dartanto, distinguished and honorable speakers, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and good day, depending on wherever you are. Welcome to this webinar and discussion of intersecting sustainable ways to implement post-COVID-19 recovery. So as it has been mentioned by Sean, my name is Jahen Reski. I'm a researcher at LPM FEB-UI, and I'll be the moderator for this session. And today we have 3 sessions actually. So in this first section, as it has been mentioned by Sean, we will discuss about G20 overall cooperation and multilateralism. So as it has been explained by the previous speakers, we have learned that due to the pandemic COVID-19, the importance of cooperation and the role of G20 have been essential in order to address and accelerate the recovery of the global economy. And in this day today, we would like to hear the views from 3 important speakers from different institutions on what would be the future of cooperation and multilateralism, especially during the post-COVID-19 recovery period. Moreover, we also want to understand what would be the important aspects that G20 countries should pay more attention. So the first speaker will be Ibu Nela Sri Hendrieti from the Asian Development Bank Institute. Ibu Nela is the Senior Capacity Building and Training Economist in ADBI. Previously, she was the Deputy Director for the G20 Forum at the Fiscal Policy Agency, Ministry of Finance. Ibu Nela holds her PhD in Economics from Victoria University. The second speaker is Pak Yose Rizal Damuri. Pak Yose is the head of the Department of Economics Center for Strategic and International Studies, CIS Indonesia. Pak Yose also has been heavily involved in the upcoming 2020 meeting in Indonesia. Pak Yose received his PhD from the Graduate Institute of International Studies from Geneva, Switzerland. And last but not least, we have our own Pak Kiki Feriko here. Pak Kiki is the Director of Research, LPFFFBUI. He's also currently the Special Advisor on Industry and International Trade to the Ministry of Finance, and also a lecturer at FBUI. Pak Kiki obtained his PhD from Waseda University, and he's also a lecturer. So before we start, I would like to inform for the audience that we are going to have a Q&A session afterwards. So if you have any questions to the speakers, you may write down your questions in the Q&A box, and then if time permits, we will try to ask your questions to the speakers. So let me start to Ibu Nela. I don't think, Ibu Nela, do you have any slides to start, or should I ask your question, Bu?
I have a slide.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, so we are quite tight in time, so I think you have 7 minutes, Bu, and then the virtual floor is yours, Bu. Please.
Yeah. Thank you, Pak Jahan, for your kind introduction. So first, thank you to Global Solution Initiative for providing opportunities to Asian Development Bank Institute to be a knowledge partner in the Intersecting book, and then to University of Indonesia in facilitating this discussion. So I believe you all have access to the book as explained by Nicholas. And yeah, from the ADBI, actually, Dean Tetsushi Sonobe and I contributed that book. So before I explain about my idea that contribute to my chapter, I would like to give you some insight about how the G20 institutional framework globally. So next slide, please. So Pak Rizal already explained how it works. So let me just emphasize that G20 principles actually democracy and inclusivity. So that's the president of the G20 is given year is determined through a system of rotation. The rotating system is critical in securing the democratic, representative, and open nature of the G20, as all member states are eligible to host. So in setting the topic of G20, the presidency of presidency government, so this 2021, this will be Indonesian government, will receive input from stakeholder national and global level. So in facilitating the inputs and the recommendation, they have like we call engagement group. So here you see there's a G20, B20, C20, so a lot of this. And then each engagement group is independent and comprised by various stakeholder, and that's led by institution in the presidency country. So that's in Indonesia, so it's G20, B20, or C20 that will be led by Indonesian think tank or Indonesian institution. So that's and then the input mostly usually coming from think tank and civil society, but can be from association, from market players too. So as a forum to promote consensus for global interests, leaders and government need to have a research-based policy to support their agenda and understanding about their international issue. So that's why where think tank and civil society are needed to give them input, assist them to have understanding what are needed for their countries and the world. And that feedback is facilitated through this engagement group. Like for me, like mostly that's I understand T20 and many other groups. So then the engagement groups can be a platform to pull ideas from stakeholders and ensure fair, independent, and transparent recommendation to be delivered to G20 presidency. So our activity today is part of the associated events or input discussion for G20 and G20. So the Intersecting book is part of Global Solution Initiative, which has been part of G20 process since German presidency, so that our input will be delivered to G20 presidency. So next slide. In the Intersecting book, I contribute as part of ADBI members. So my perspective here is more like global or regional. So I see some of my writing in the Intersecting become a background of this session. So maybe I emphasize that. So please let me explain here my underlying thinking of such idea. Start from public goods. So public goods usually are prominent needs for society, such as clean water, health, even like street lighting. So people sometimes can benefit from public goods for free. That leads to lack of incentive to produce them by profit-seeking private providers. On the other hand, these public goods usually have significant positive spillover effects to community, but they're not reflected or cannot be measured in market value. So this situation makes these goods underproduced. So therefore, it needs government intervention to ensure everyone has access or able to consume or use that public goods. In global perspective, G20 should define what are the common public goods among countries that are more needed in this situation. So there are many papers discussed about the public goods in health, vaccines, data, surveillance and control disease, research, cost and treatment, information sharing, even standard and guidelines, and then also how to financing such effort. So in relation to economic growth, local resiliency is very important. The resilience is not only in the area of medical and health, but also basic needs of goods. So our experience of COVID-19, like Pak Sua said, is a game changer. But in here, it's a trigger for us to re-examining the meaning of our local resilience. So we can see clearer many gaps in our community to be resilient. So the gaps may be there before, but now it can be seen clearly. So in here, I take some input like supply chain infrastructure to support is very crucial. So IMF report also said that public investment in healthcare, education, physical and digital infrastructure to promote recovery. So, but country needs to identify which sector will support their local resilience. So for example, for countries with a lot of small, medium enterprise, boosting those sectors to grow will have significant impact to the economy. So the support is not only the financial, but also their market, so their knowledge and capacity. So the effort from ASEAN, I think the discussion in session 2 about how creative economy can facilitate SME to develop is important too. So to explain in short, there are, next slide please. There are some strategies where the G20 can help to set this issue. These are based on our papers to G20. So first that reshape agenda and stimulus, so keep priorities in infrastructure and climate change and financing. So first, countries need to reshape their agenda and adapt to the new normal. So there's massive economic stimulus has been injected to economies. So according to IMF, this has been like 20% of global GDP. However, there are few countries have reviewed the effectiveness of the measures, the current stimulus, and also few revisited or keep committed to their medium and long-term priorities, like Pak Sua mentioned that how we need to still focus on our medium and long-term priorities. So in here, I think G20 can help countries to develop and monitoring or evaluation tools for their fiscal measures and provide guidelines to keep countries on track. Second, countries need to keep their priorities on infrastructure and climate change on track. So with so many immediate needs to tackle to be resilient in the pandemic, some countries may set aside their target for their two sectors. In our ADBI papers, we suggest that countries should focus on social infrastructure, sustainable infrastructure, and digital infrastructure for their medium and long-term plan for economic recovery. So next, please. The global pandemic has shown in this global safety index that existing healthcare infrastructure is lagging behind and is unprepared to deal with health emergency. So we see the level of preparedness or resilience of countries is better in countries with better infrastructure. So the less infrastructure level, there's less resilient the community. So even though infrastructure doesn't seem to have a immediate impact on economic recovery, actually research show that fiscal multipliers of public investment on infrastructure is higher than many other types of public spending. That even like higher in the contraction period. So we have estimate from Global Infrastructure Hub that the multiplier is around 0.8 in 1 year, or 1.7 within 2 to 5 years, and in the during contractional period, that's 1.6 a year. So there's another paper from Fernando and Makiben. Next, please. That increased infrastructure investment is one of the 4 policy package for economic recovery, due to its that's quite significant multiplier impact to the economy. So I think the paper proposed a 4 policy package. I think already mentioned Pak Sua, Pak Rizal before this. Kind of like Indonesia is in line with that. That's increased fiscal transfer, increased current stimulus, increased infrastructure investment, and early production and distribution of vaccine. But the paper found with the model they calculate that suggests that investment in infrastructure is the impact is quite significant, and the government should increase the spending by 2% of GDP to boost the multiplier effect. So in order to successfully develop quality infrastructure project with high multiplier effect, all public and private stakeholders must ensure connectivity of the project with source of growth, and collectively participate to build and develop, operate the infrastructure. So with that, government need to analyze infrastructure needs and investment priority that are in line with their current 3 characteristics: fiscal challenge and economic agenda. They need to identify value chain that are likely to generate the greatest demand for infrastructure service in the country without neglecting other sectors. So the next one, as I said, climate change. Before the climate change were on track, even that's still not achieved their 2030 agenda. But then there's a paper from United Nations that because of the COVID-19, I think countries are now more behind their track in achieve the SDG 2030. Even before the pandemic, actually, the effort is there, keep increasing, but because the rise is being surpassed by investment in fossil. So the third one, our recommendation is to discuss by G20 is the financing. So the aftermath of pandemic, government have a limited public funds for financing. The mobilization of financing from private sector and foreign sources, together with innovative scheme and mechanism for financing needed. So government also face increased pressure on their budget and public debt. So at the same time, government must secure additional financial resources to brace themselves for potential subsequent wave of the pandemic, while also getting their growth trajectory back on track to achieve the SDGs. So that further investment are needed. So one of the key success in achieving SDG lie on the strengthening domestic revenue mobilization and international tax cooperation. I think G20 already there to discuss this, but I think the discussion should be like enhanced and reset with the COVID-19 approach. So I believe there's a lot of to discuss international forum. We have this trade discussion that how the trade of the vaccine in the world should be accelerate and everything. So that's a lot. So but I will stop here and ready to receive question later. Thank you.
Thank you, Bu Nela, for your presentation. I think there are 3 main things that need to be addressed during the G20. The first one is what will be the agenda. We need to reshape the agenda and also the economic stimulus. The second one is keep the policy or priorities straight. So I think we also need to focus on more about climate change. I think you mentioned before, and also about the financing issues. I will come back later on, Bu Nela, but I will give the virtual force to Pak Yose first, Pak. So let we hear your views about the future of G20, especially about the cooperation and multilateralism.
Okay.
Silakan, Pak.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jahen. A very good afternoon to all of you, and also very good morning, perhaps, to all of you who joined from Europe or from other countries. allow me to first to say my appreciations to LPM, FEBUI for taking initiative to have this kind of dialogue, to have these events, which is very, in my opinion, so a very important and also touch upon critical issues that we're facing today. And also, I would like to say congratulations to Nicholas and also the Global Solution Initiative, who managed to deliver a very good, I think, very important publications, the Intersecting. I have to admit, I haven't really get a chance to look at the whole book, but I really look forward to read the volume, and also perhaps would like to would look forward to participate for the next edition, Nicola. Thank you very much. Yeah. Yes. Jahan, if I may, I would like to share my screen to show some points that I think quite interesting to discuss. I only have two slides here. The first one here. Yeah, the Ibu Nella already mentions about the importance of public goods, especially at the international and global level. So we, especially when we need to deal with the this pandemic. So with that, I would like to invite your attentions, attract your attentions to look at what kind of issues that we need to deal currently as related to the pandemic and also the related crisis it already bring. Maybe we have to we can try to define those issues into the short-term, medium-term, and long-term one, like what already Pak Vice Minister Swahasil and also Pak Rizal Afandi Lukman already mentions, because we don't need to just because we need to focus on the short-term issues, we forgot to pay attention on the medium and long-term one. But in the short-term issues, we still need to deal with the health issues, vaccine production and distributions, also improving health facilities and equipment, especially in less developed countries. We still even don't know exactly the real prevalence, the real number of cases in many less developed countries, because they basically don't have sufficient equipment and sufficient facilities to identify the pandemic. Another thing, so we also still need to support developing and LDCs, especially in the financial issues, like for example by extending debt supports or giving financial support. So far, the international corporations have been doing quite a lot on that, including also using international organizations such as the World Bank, who already provide some support, around 100 billion US dollar have been poured into to deal with the COVID issues, but it's still very small compared to the stimulus and fiscal support that has been delivered, especially in the developed countries, that accounts around almost 20 trillion US dollar. So $100 billion is still very small, and we still need to do to support and to promote this kind of support and facilitation and to the less developed and developing countries. On the medium terms, there are few things that we need to pay attention. One issue is how to deal with the exit strategy, especially when we deal with the when we need to relax the fiscal support and debt issues that comes with this fiscal support. With that, we need to strengthen the financial safety nets for sure. The macroeconomic situations also need to get more attention. We are still lucky because during the year of pandemic, we're still free with the from the financial crisis, actually financial sector crisis, but the risk is increasing at the moment, and the current situations need to both at global and regionals need to have a stronger financial safety net. Yeah, not less important or even more important is to revitalize connectivity and economic relations. We already see that the trade has been going on for quite a while, has been recovered for quite a while, but we still see some logistical bottlenecks to support trade and investments in the future, especially in the context of recovery. And another type of connectivity, which is a people-to-people connectivity, also remain to be limited, especially when we're talking about tourism, when we're talking about people mobility, and then we still need to find a way to deal with that kind of things. Another things, of course, to support this small medium enterprise, especially on jumping start their activities. This is not this is not easy. Although we already know that those small medium enterprise are the ones that get hit most during this crisis, but. Aside from the short term and medium terms, we also still need to look at on the longer term perspective. We don't want this recovery only just a recovery. We need to have a stronger, faster, and higher quality recovery, as mentioned by keynote speakers before. We also need to use this crisis as a momentum to put more resources toward the realizations of SDG, sustainable development goals. Although this is much easier to say than done, because we know that the attentions and resources might be shifted away from all those projects that might be useful or that might be supporting the realizations of SDG to the other need the more immediate demands. Putting more resources should becomes a global agenda as well for the realizations of SDGs. Another issues that I think is quite important is also preparing global economic governance to be more adaptive and resilient, such as, for example, how to deal with digital transformations. We cannot just deal with digital transformations at national level or regional level. It has to be solved at a global level. We have to agree what kind of rules, what kind of a set of rules that will be applied on the digital transformations. There is also an issue of reconfigurations of GVCs that might be affecting many developing and also less developed countries. Of course, this is not an exhaustive list, and this longer terms or medium terms doesn't mean that we cannot pay attention on it, but longer terms means that we also need to put this issue in the perspective, the longer perspective. We also still need to start to think about those issues right away. But of course, those kind of issues need global cooperation. But the global cooperations and global goods, like Bu Nela also already mentioned. But it's again, it's much easier said than done, because there are many challenges in the global economic cooperations. And one thing that we learn from the current situation, pandemic situations, that global economic cooperation is very difficult to do, especially in the time of crisis, because I try to put some issues, some aspect that might be hindering the stronger global economic cooperation, from domestic and national interests, lack of trust between countries involved, increasing tensions also, especially between the U.S. and the China and China. And another thing is also insufficient mechanisms in many development forum, global forum, including in G20, or even at the regional level in ASEAN. We do have a lot of commitments, but we don't have mechanisms, we don't have institutions to carry out those commitments. But of course, we need to do something about it. And again, like Professor Suhasil mentions, this is also a momentum. Don't waste the crisis. And I think with new ideas and also with dialogues, especially among people to people, among members of societies, among academics and intellectuals, we can perhaps come up with a better way, better approach to push for the stronger cooperations at the global and also at the regional levels. That's my take on this issue. I'm sorry if it takes a little bit too long, Jehan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pak Yose. That was really great, Pak. So if I may to summarize a little bit about your presentation, you provided 3 important issues in the first short term, and then medium term, and then long run. But it needs to be addressed, the global cooperation. So if we cannot ensure that G20 countries would commit to do these 3 things, then it will be difficult to achieve the faster recovery period. So I will go back to you again, Pak Yose, afterwards, and I will proceed to Pak Kiki Feriko. So I think Pak Kiki will give his perspective from the Ministry of Finance probably, and also from academia. So Pak Kiki, the Zoom meeting is yours, Pak.
Thank you, Jahan. I think I take more from academics perspective. Yep. Okay. Please allow me to share screen. Okay. All right. So easier, and then it makes me more follow the time available. I think please remind me if I over 7 minutes. All right. Okay. Thank you very much, Jahan, for your kind introduction. His Excellency Deputy Minister of Finance Republic of Indonesia, Professor Suhasil, Pak Rizal Afandi, His Excellency, and Nicholas, Ibu Nela, and Mas Yose. All right, I want to touch this issue. I have a slides more than, I think, in between Ibu Nela and Mas Yose, but of course I will stick to the time 7 minutes for the presentations. I would like to see the G20 from the multilateralism and global value chains. Ibu Nela also put this in her presentation, and Mas Yose put this as long-term issues. Let me touch these issues again, but before I would like to, I think as we are all aware that the G20 consists of 19 countries and 1 regional cooperation or regional, and it consists of, as Pak Rizal mentioned, around almost 90% of GDP, and almost 80%, including the EU of the trade, and around 2/3 of populations, and more than half of land size of Earth. So it's a big, huge. And then it consists from the GDP, that's from the GDP size, from the population, and also from the GDP per capita. We can understand this full circle, well-rounded of economic forms, cooperations in terms, because it consists of from developing and developed, from lower middle to high income country. And if you can see the right-hand side of the intra and interregional merchandise trade, these all countries that control the gravity of the economy, especially from trade and investment, from North America, Latin America continent, Western Europe, Eastern Europe, and Africa continent, and Asia, of course. So it's a full circle. It's a well-rounded, complete 360 kind of network. But at the moment, as you read the history, and also I read from the book, mentioned that the G20 shown the significant progress because of due to in 2008 was because of pressure for the global financial crisis. So it's called crisis both there. And I would like to show you again, and as we are aware that almost all countries in the world are now under the sub-zero economic growth, which is negative, which is construction. And we don't know when this pandemic, whether stay in pandemic or maybe most likely become the endemic, and it will be left us with the scar effect, which actually not very short run and perhaps in the long run, and we don't know when, we don't know where it will done. So again, these two, one complete set of figures of the economic operations, and the second is a crisis. If we combine together, then we come up with this kind of solution that we need. Let me take an example of automobiles production network. More or less annually before the pandemic, the world produced around 70 million cars per year annually. And as you know that every year we have 31.5 million seconds. So you can imagine that every second there are 2 cars produced in the world every second. So how many minutes I talk? 7 minutes. 7 minutes meaning that around 840 cars, automobiles produced. And how many minutes we spend for this talk? About 210 minutes is about 25,000 cars produced in the world. So production network never stop, and they cannot wait. So now they are facing the serious disruption, and it's not only for one country, but the whole world. And it's not only for global, but also domestic. And the production network and the multiplier effect and all these things which connected investment and trade effect or given an effect tremendously significant for all around the world. So if you see the production networks for the car, no country can produce only one products. I took example of the cars, but you can take any examples, your cell phone, your television, your printer, and so on. So it needs cooperation, 100 countries involved. And if you look at in the middle a picture, you can see the production network. But if you can take all the, also including service sectors, after sale service, logistic, a shipment, and so on, you can see it's like stars in the sky, like a star in the Milky Way. It's a wonderful figures, but now they are under pressure, and the government need to do something because it involves the governments. We know that if governments also depends on the economic situation, economic condition, and this global issue is a very serious things. Okay. What solutions that we can offer? So it's simple as we learned from Keynes in 1930s during the global during the Great Depressions. In the short run, 3 arrows that we have: fiscal expansionary or contra-cyclical, monetary expansionary, the lowering the interest rate and hoping for the real sector will grow and jump starting and so on, and structural reform. How about the long run? Simple, 3 arrows again, trade and investment. Why trade investment? Because trade is the core of the current account, and investment is the core of capital account. Current account plus capital account is balance of payment, and balance of payment is saving, because saving is equal to investment and net export. Net export is current account, investment is capital account. So again, the issue is there. But then production network, and then the last but not least, there's a cross-cutting issue. They connected between the short run and long run. What is it? It is structural reform. So what structural reform kind of that the G20 has to promote? The structural reform that moving from openness, trade-led growth to investment-led growth. Now we are, as we are aware, the world or the earth, the Mother Earth, remind us it's not only about your productions but also your sustainable economic recovery, as mentioned by Pak Yose, the SDG, environment justice, environment-led growth. Let's be green, and then let's pay attention on our endogenous growth beside or in addition, or not beside in addition, but from another part from the human capital is environments, is a healthy system, is human health, is also green economy, and so on, which is related to this cooperation that connect again in the production network. So production is still a backbone for the economy because it's connect between raw materials and services, services from insurance, finance, transportation, even after sales service. But then afterwards, as I mentioned, we need a structural reform that green. That's why I put the green color for the structural reform. That's for remain issue both short run and long run. So let's pay attention on this for our a better future, and hope. Of course, finger crossed, we can survive. And then if 100 years ago the world can survive from the pandemic as well, so we have to survive also. And then this is for, let's do it for our children, grandchildren, and great grandchildren, and for the future of the world. Thank you. I'll stop here.
Thank you, Pak Kiki. Thanks very much for your views about it. So I think I will open the Q&A question. If anyone from the audience that will raise her hand, her or his hand to ask questions to the speakers, then I think we could allow those who want to ask anything to the speakers. Otherwise, if no, then I have some questions to all of the speakers, if I may. So I think the main thing that has been raised by Ibu Nela, Pak Yose, and also Pak Kiki is about structural reform. And I know that the government is facing difficulty to do some reforms during this period, especially Pak Kiki maybe knows better about it because we have some problem with the financing issues. So what should the government prioritize during this recovery period? So is there any particular things that the government should pay attention for, or just following Pak Yose, we have to focus on the short run first, dealing with the health sectors, providing vaccinations, and so on and so forth. So maybe I would like to hear the panelists' views about these things. Silakan Ibu Nela first, probably.
Thank you, Pak Jahan. Actually, we wrote that NDBI paper we wrote to G20. So I think they're still in the reviewing process right now, and then they will be published later. So the first thing that we cannot just like try to focus on the short term and but leave behind the medium and long term. So we need to have a framework. I believe that we have like stimulus framework, but we need, maybe with this situation, we need to reshape that. And then the stimulus, the recovery stimulus right now, that can also be allocated to the medium and long term as well. Fiscal transfer is crucial, I mean, to boost consumption and then the living standard of people, right? So, but then the stimulus also be like going to the urgent needs of infrastructure. So maybe the urgent need of infrastructure for the medium and long term is different from the before pandemic. Or maybe before is a port, road, a tollway, but maybe now more to digitalization, to social infrastructure. So that's one we need to. I mean, I said reshaping, I think, but not like leave one for another. Thank you, Pak.
Thank you, Nela. Pak Yose or Pak Kiki, do you want to add something for that particular question?
Okay, on the reform side, I think we all already know that what that we need to do. Like Professor Suhasil also mentioned that we've been talking about these reforms since ages, maybe already decades, but still we need to discuss about it, and perhaps also we should also put new perspective on the required reform, on this necessary reforms that we need to do. Like, for example, when we're talking about reforms 10 or 20 years ago, we didn't really talk about digital transformations and what to deal with the risk and the downside of the digital transformation. But now, when we're talking about reforms, we also need to put that perspective. Another thing is also about environment and climate change. Now, when we're talking about reform, we cannot escape from dealing with the sustainability principles and also with take into account all those factors that's related to the environment. When we're building infrastructure, for example, we cannot just build infrastructure that is good for the economy, but also need to be preserving environment and also would be provide benefit to the local communities, for example. That kind of things we need to still need to discuss about this reform, because although the bigger picture remain the same, but we put more and more perspective that will add to a better and more quality reforms that we're going to have.
Thank you, Pak Yose.
Okay, let me put perspective of this. Back then in 1918 or 1920, when the global pandemic also happened in the world, Keynes said that we start with a big investment and a huge countercyclical policy, develop infrastructure. But by the time, if you remember, there's also a thought from Schumpeter that's saying, why don't we start from the inclusiveness, empowering the people to survive by its own? But that idea was not supported and a little bit anti-streaming, and no one bought that issue at the time. But after Industrial Revolution 3.0 with the computer, and then in Industrial Revolution 4.0 with the smartphone, now we are having now another pandemic, and the idea of Schumpeter, I think, overpassed the idea of Keynes, which is we can survive with our own. We can produce, the small medium enterprise can produce their own product without big investment. Then there's another story. But again, the name remain. The name is structural reform. So fiscal, monetary, structural reform. The name is the same, but the way a bit different because of the technology role. And digital economy, I think, helped us very much. I cannot imagine if it happens 10 years ago or 15 years ago, before the Gojek, Grab, or everything, help you to on-demand digital roles. And also like this, it helps us much. We can, from all around country in the world, can involve into this one discussion, and that's the digital transformation means.
Okay, Pak Kiki. Yeah, thanks for your answers. I think we have one participant who wants to raise question, Pak Nanan or Bu Nanan. I think Pak Nanan. Should I allow to talk? Please, Pak Nanan. I think you may also ask in Bahasa if you want that the speakers would answer in English. Silakan Pak Nanan. No? Okay. So, okay, no, from Pak Nanan. So I think, Sean, we are running out of time, right? So, but we still have time?
I guess, yeah, you're right.
Okay, so yeah, so I think, I know we are still have many things to discuss, but Bu Nela, Pak Yose, and Pak Kiki. So I think later on we can arrange another discussion meeting, then we can discuss anything else about the role of G20 and also Indonesia in the future to tackle this pandemic issue, and also how to accelerate and boost economic recovery post COVID-19. So thanks for your time, Bu Nela, Pak Yose, and Pak Kiki. Because we are running out of time, I don't want to try to summarize our meeting. I will give it back to Sean. Sean, thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Jahan. Before we proceed further, we would like to invite Pak Jahen and all of the speakers to open their camera for the group photo session. So if Pak Fahmi could assist us in the group photo session.
Oke, terima kasih banyak, Bu Nela, Mas
Thank you.
Yose.
Thank you, Ibu.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Jahan, and all of the speakers for the enlightening discussion.
Jahan, Bunela. Thank you.
Terima kasih.
Thank you. Right, we will now proceed to the second session of the seminar. That is the creative economy and digital infrastructure. The session will last about an hour, and it will discuss about the importance of accelerating digital transformation of businesses to digital platforms, such as e-commerce. I would like to invite Mr. Teguh Rifki, the chair of the session, to open his webcam. Mr. Rifki is a macro and financial economist at the Institute for Economic and Social Research, or LPM, Universitas Indonesia. He earned his master's degree in economics and international financial economics from the University of Warwick. His research interests include macroeconomics, financial sectors, finance, fiscal, and monetary policies. He has worked for various institutions as an independent consultant, including UNDP, ADB, World Bank, Fiscal Policy Agency, and the Korean Institute for Economic Policy. So, Mr. Rifki, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Sean, for your kind introduction. Okay, good afternoon, everyone, ladies and gentlemen, honored guests, speakers, and participants of this today's webinar. We are now entering the second session of our panel discussion. I hope we will see 5 fantastic minds talking about a very important topic, which is a creative economy and digital infrastructure. So with us now, we have Pak Ricky Joseph Pesik, Bu Tita Larasati, Pak Dian Revindo, Pak Jim Khalilul Rohan, Bu Erik Sioson. So let me just briefly introduce our distinguished speaker for this panel session. First of all, we have Pak Ricky Pesik, who has worked in advertising for 23 years and managed to put the agency Satu Citra as one of the respected local advertising companies in Indonesia by winning various awards in many advertising festivals. From July 2015 until October 2019, Pak Ricky was appointed as the Vice Chairman for the Indonesia Agency for Creative Economy, or as we all know, BECRAF. And from February to December 2020, he was continued his role in creative economy as special staff on digital and creative economy industry for former Minister of Tourism, Pak Wisnu Tama. And since November until now, Pak Ricky appointed as the President Commissioner of Indonesia Tourism Development Corporation, or ITDC, a state-owned company managing the Nusa Dua Bali and the Mandalika Lombok. And next, we have Bu Dwinita Larasati, or Tita Larasati, as she is trained as an industrial product designer at ITB, Institute Teknologi Bandung, where she currently works as a lecturer and researcher. She pursued her study at Design Academia Eindhoven and Delft University of Technology, the Netherlands. She is also the chairperson of Bandung Creative Economy City Forum, BCCF, and is the focal point of Bandung City of Design, UNESCO Creative Cities Network. She is also in the advisory board of West Java Creative Economy and Innovation Committee, or Kreasi Jabar, and Deputy of Strategic Partnership Indonesia Creative Cities Network, or ICCN. She is an International Advisory Council of Creative Industry Policy and Evidence Center, PEC UK, and belongs to the Indonesian Young Academy of Science and the Indonesia Academy of Science. And next, we have Dian Revindo, Pak Revi, who joined the LPM FBUI in 2009 and has been appointed as the head of Business Climate and Global Value Chain Research Group since 2017. His research interests include MSME, tourism, microfinance, industrial organization, and international trade. In addition to research, Pak Revindo is also a lecturer at the Graduate School of Strategic and Global Studies, University of Indonesia, and the editor-in-chief of Journal of Economics and Finance in Indonesia, or EFI. Pak Revindo earned his PhD in economics from Lincoln University, New Zealand, MA in European Studies, and MSc in economics from KU Leuven, Belgium, and EBE Economics in Economics and Development Studies from the University of Indonesia. Also, next we have Pak Ibrahim Khalilur Rahman. Pak Rahman holds his PhD in Technology Management and Economics from Chalmers University of Technology, Gothenburg, Sweden in 2012. Currently, Pak Rahman serves as the head of economic research for Samudra Indonesia, with research focusing on logistics, shipping, and transportation. He is also the lecturer on digital economics at Faculty of Economics and Business at Universitas of Indonesia. Last but not least, we have Bu Erika Paula Sioson. Bu Erika is a senior officer for culture and information under the Sustainable Development Directorate of ASEAN Socio-Cultural Community Department at the ASEAN Secretariat in Jakarta. She has more than 10 years of experience in international development and has worked for development and research organization in Manila and Tokyo. She was previously with the Japan International Cooperation Agency, Ogata Research Institute, and the Asian Development Bank Institute, or ADBI. She has a PhD in human security from the University of Tokyo. So that's all our 5 distinguished speakers for this session. I would like also briefly to introduce the rules of the game. So rules of the game, we start with around 7 minutes per person with a 1-minute warning at 6 minutes, after which I start talking loudly so that I interfere with your conversation. That's to convince you to get off after 7. So 7 minutes per person, then we go into a discussion where I will ask questions and they will be pointed at someone. But then others feel free to respond. Others on the panel feel free to respond as well. And the audience also feel free to ask questions by our chat, and I'll try to sort of put them into the conversation. But maybe after 30 or 35 minutes, we'll have an open session where anybody can ask, and if it gets unmanageable, let's see how that plays out. For now, we start with an opening statement or presentation by the panelists, and need Pak Riki to start. Pak Riki, are you with us?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Pak Riki, the floor is yours.
Okay. I make it short since it's on this 7 minutes. Hopefully, I'm not exceeding the times allocated. First of all, about the discussion about this creative economy, the major topic about the creative economy and the digital transformation. I would like for all of us probably to reflect to what happened after the pandemic. That's already almost 2 years in now, more than almost 1.5 years now we facing. Are we learning a better way to survive, or are we already have some progressive or a new paradigm for a solution to survive through this pandemic, especially in the creative economy sectors? This is the biggest question. I remember that the government have one major program that's trying to invite all the creative industry players, especially from the SME sectors, the product local producers in the creative industry sectors, to transform into the e-commerce. Currently, the figures is quite promising, because almost more than 3 million new creative industry in SME transform into the e-commerce. They jump into this platform, but we don't know how the result yet. That under the program of Bangga Buatan Indonesia. But I think that's not the only key issue that we have to find the solution. The biggest question also about the government investment. Previously, the Vice Minister, Pak Sua, already mentioned about how the economy recovery is mostly will depend on how government spending. If we seeing the the creative economy or the creative industry as the futures for the Indonesian economy, then we probably have to reevaluate again the strategy and the investment from the government in the creative industry economy sectors. If we see the currently the situation, I believe we have still not progressing pretty much in terms of the strategy investment from the government budget in the creative industry sectors. I think we can see this from the RPJMN in Bappenas, and sadly to say, I can see that even the investment in the creative sectors is not increase but decrease today, especially after the merger of the Bekraf and the tourism ministry. But I think this need to be evaluated. The second term is we need to see the effectiveness because now I think if we see the data, if I not mistaken, since 10 years ago, the data from World Bank or from EY already showcase that the creative industry, creative and entertainment industries economy is 2.5 times bigger than military expenditure, global military expenditure, and also is 150% bigger than all the oil business by OPEC. So the question is this portrayed on the government investment in the creative industry to see the creative industry as a future of the economy for Indonesia? I'm sometimes make a joke. If that we want to truly showing the commitment that we want the creative economy industry as a future of Indonesia, I think the creative economy budget from government should be 2 times bigger than Ministry of Defense. if that's the case, because the creative economy itself is 2 times bigger than the global military expenditure. So that's how we put it. But I think what we need to reevaluate now is how we strengthen the ecosystem, better ecosystem for the creative industry to create a easier pathway for the creative players to increase their business, to create more value added for their business. And now I have the analogy like this, like now we embrace the new big news about the merger of 2 Indonesia unicorn, Gojek and Tokopedia. But I think that's not the give big impact if we not create a stronger ecosystem for the creative industry. I have the analogy like this. The merger is something we look forward. Will contribute a bigger impact for the macroeconomy of Indonesia, especially after they doing this listing on the stock market. Even if the issue is they will have dual listing, but it's the merger is like we see some heaven across the river, but we don't have the bridge yet. We don't have the ship yet that will bring our creative player to cross the river, to go to that heaven. If we not prepare all the bridge, all the proper bridge, all the proper transportation to across the river, then the others will enjoy the heaven across the river. So that's what will happen. So this is our challenge, I think, to create the strengthened ecosystem for the creative industry in the future. So nevertheless, we also have the big issue that we need to show our commitment. This year, the UN already declared as the International Year of Creative Economy. So this is the World International Year for Creative Economy to 2021. But I have seen not yet any global initiative movement together to create a common platform together to accommodate the creative economy globally being a new future together. So this is one of the big issue. And unfortunately, because of this pandemic, a lot of program has been postponed. But we will have this World Forum in Dubai at the end of this year, and I believe Indonesia will host the next one in Bali next year. So it will be in the similar year with G20 in Bali, and I think it will take in the same place. So
Ricky, you have 1 minute left.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Okay.
So I think the big question is probably that we need to reevaluate our strategy. We need to have a new strategy, and the most important thing also, I think, in terms of this strategy, we need to think a new ecosystem that can provide a better and progressive incentive to the creative industry nationwide. So this is what we lack of. In terms of the creative competition between nations, I think Indonesia is still in the stage of very pure condition for the incentive and subsidize for the creative industry in order for them to be competitive globally. So in order to do that, I think we need to reevaluate, and I hope in the future we can spend the big budget from government in the creative industry wisely and through the ecosystem that can create progressive incentive for the creative industry, because that's what we really need in order to make our creative industry local can compete globally. Through all this platform that already progressing through technology, through digital economy, and anything, and probably in the future through all many of Internet of Things that will be appears very soon. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Pak, for your. Next, we have Bu Tita Larasati. Bu Tita, are you with us?
Yes, I'm very much here.
Okay, sure. Okay, great. Okay, Bu Tita, goes to you. The floor. Go ahead.
Yes. Can I please have my slides on while I can deliver my preparation? So, thank you, of course, for the opportunity to LPM FEB-UI, and I think this is an important moment, as Nicola have said as well, to put this issue forward. So, in this occasion, I would like to have just to say my 3 propositions about these issues, and it will help if I have my slides on, because then I can read it out. Otherwise, shall I share it from mine?
Yeah. Please go ahead. I think we have a issue from our end, so if you could just share it from your end, that would be great.
Sure. I'll try now. So now I hope you can see the screen, and I will start making it full.
Yeah, yeah, we are seeing it.
Right. So in this occasion, I have 3 propositions that I would just say in this 5 to 7 minutes. The first one is that creative economy is not a standalone issue, which we all agree actually together already, and that community initiatives in creative economy contribute significantly to the recovery. This has to do with the bottom-up efforts that we did, especially during the pandemic. And then the last one is inclusive and sustainable impacts can be reinforced with institutional enactments. And for the first one, actually we have a lot of models here, but one of them is first about the ecosystem, which we refer to creative economy as the whole ecosystem. So not only the commercial part of it, or not only the transaction about it, but then also about developing the human creators, the creative persons who would produce goods, products, intangible and tangible, and also services that has to do with that really basically mainly rely on the creative efforts and also intellectual properties that will be delivered to markets, which should be healthy, and also spaces of appreciations and so on. And then there's also R&D, actually to develop either materials or systems, methods, production systems, and so on that will give feedback to the creators. And then we also know that it was mentioned that about triple helix stakeholders, quadruple helix, there was pentahelix, and now we have the sixth helix, which is the aggregator platform, including financial institutions, incubations, accelerators, and so on. So here clearly we see that creative economy is not a business of just creative people or creative professionals, but also a lot of stakeholders that should make things go on according to how we wish. And as in a city level, usually creative economy is seen as these creative cities, creative cities principles that Indonesia Creative Cities Network has developed in 10 principles with keywords such as compassion, inclusivity, solidarity, and so on, which complies with the SDG. So also according to UNESCO Creative Cities Network, all city members should actually comply to this SDG, and they should make global connections and collaborations in order to answer to the challenges of SDG by using their creative potentials. So this is how Indonesia is arranging theirs. And then we also make an attempt to adapt the 10 principles to Indonesian government's performance index. And we currently develop them into an Indonesia Creative Cities Index dashboard, which would help local governments to make decisions based on creative economy potentials in real time. So by doing this, this is the first statement that we would like to put out there. And the second propositions is that community initiatives in creative economy actually contribute significantly to the recovery, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, when we know that there's lack of data, especially to the majority of Indonesian people, because not everybody, for example, has identification or mobile phone or bank account or anything that is needed to actually give support to them, because we don't want the public money to be distributed in a reckless way. So it should be really validated. So at the beginning, but at the same time, people have been needing help. So we as a community-based community hub, we then make an effort to have our own system. So we make the Solidarity Act with 5 task forces, which goes through these phases of mitigate and surviving, and then recovering, reestablishing and developing, and then growing and sustaining. So this is, of course, an iterative, so things should go back, but then we always have these 5 task forces to handle this. Among others is, of course, usually or actually in majority, creative economy, creative industries is done in an environment that is exactly forbidden during the pandemic, which is meeting in person, making transaction directly, opening marketplaces, and so on. So everything suddenly had to go online. Everything had suddenly had to be relied on to the internet and all the systems that is not usually there. So that's why we are also taking this opportunity to do some reskilling and upskilling of small and medium enterprises, especially the micro enterprises, to be able to connect the product to the consumers and to find out how to make new kind of deliveries, which is safe for everybody and also still convenient and so on. So we also do research on to identify new opportunities. We look into what kind of products is actually in demand, which usually has to do with health and well-being, organic products, how to deliver education, communication, and mobility, and so on. We also look for new ways to shift how to manufacture and deliver products and services in a safe way. And inclusive and sustainable impacts maintained by community hubs and networks. We also have to do this. So in a way, we are helping these indigenous people, especially because we have distributed all these logistics even to the farthest islands and so on, because we're using our informal community networks. And the further you can read about it in the book Intersecting. And the third proposition is that all this actually could they were happening without the concrete support from the government, because we were doing it by ourselves. But that doesn't mean that we don't need them as so, because we we are convinced that inclusive and sustainable impacts can be reinforced with institutional enactment. So these are just some examples. This year, the Faculty of Arts and Design of ITB, we are raising awareness and encouraging strategies through academic discourses by having these conferences, Icon Arcade, that discuss the importance of creative economy to reach sustainable development. Mas Ricky earlier have said about this International Year of Creative Economy for Sustainable Development, who are encouraged, and actually it was led by Indonesia when we were proposing this to the UN, and it was approved and supported by more than 80 countries. So actually the global world is looking into Indonesia for this global leadership on creative economy, which is, there's a bit of change since it is back merged into the with the Ministry for Tourism. But of course, we have to find a way around it. And then at the local level, we as communities have pushed the government to really pass the bill on creative economy for Bandung City, because what happens was we already have the strategy for creative economy and so on. But then when the local leader changed, then we also find a change in policy usually and in strategy and so on. When creative economy or creativity or creative city wasn't mentioned in the short and long and midterm development plan, then everything changed at the local level. So then we passed the bill to make sure that whoever leads the city is would include creative economy in the development strategy. So the last part of the proposition is that when I had a chance to talk in the G20 Culture webinar about design for social change, changing perspectives, and so on, it is important to keep in mind that the inclusive creative economy can lead to wide opportunities for relevant growth for societies that are resilient. So it's this resilience that we are looking for, and that should be recognized by either formal and informal institutions within a place. So if we include,
you have 1 minute left.
Sure. Including the preservation and activation of cultural heritage in choosing what's relevant, because if we want to talk about culture, then we have to see what to keep and what to really endorse and so on. Last time is our policy recommendation for U20, because we were involved as the U20 Urban 20 think tank, and also we are involved with T20 this year, which emphasized the creative economy supports for human-centered development, because we are convinced that creative economy is among the sector that can face the future by using technology and by finding jobs, especially for young people, by also minding this technology, the digital technology, and so on. This kind of works because we have the three main traits, which are the high order cognitive skill. We tend to find what is new. We tend to innovate and so on, because we don't want to be. We want to find healthy rivalry by doing this innovation. And we are usually technologically savvy because we catch soon what is the newest trend or what is the newest technology that is out there to use it to deliver our products and services. And the third one is that we have the interpersonal ability that has been coexisting within the creative economy ecosystem, which help us redefine about professions, about jobs, and so on in the future. And you can read that through the complete version through this link, urban20riyadh.org. And that's for me so far. Thank you very much. I'll give the floor back to you.
And thank you, Bu Tita, for your comprehensive presentation. Next, we have Pak Revindo. If you're already on, the floor is yours, Pak.
Thank you, Pak Rifki. Can you hear me clear?
Yes.
Oke. Baik, selamat sore Pak Wamen, Profesor Sua, Pak Rizal Afandi, Pak Dekan, dan Pak Riki. First, I would like to begin my short talk by congratulating Nicola for an enormous effort to put all these things together in a very short time. This book is very timely and relevant. And I will also congratulate all the contributors because this book is very practical. Rather than theoretical approach, you show what has been done and what can be done in the future. However, the book is so interesting, so much so that it triggers me to put forward some points for discussion. I have 4 points for discussion this afternoon. The first, I would like to call for more realistic target or more pragmatic approach to see the digital transformation. The second one, I would like to address the disparity in ICT infrastructure. The third one, I would like to address as well the disparity in digital literacy. And finally, how they all determine the inclusiveness and the accessibility of the digital technology. So, okay, let's go through them one by one. First one, I'm afraid that I have to call for let's reformulate what we understand by digital transformation, because when we talk about digital transformation for SMEs, for creative actors, very often we hear about, okay, make them on board to e-commerce platform. Is that what we are pushing forward? I'm not sure about that. Why? Okay, the pandemic has shown us a more bright side, despite of course some downside. But the bright side is that 20% of SMEs have joined the e-commerce platform. That's a good news. 50% of consumers are more familiar with online purchase. That's also good news. But I would like to call to return to the basic definition of digital transformation, rather than push them to the online platform or e-commerce platform. Digital transformation, to my opinion, is just how the creative economy actors or the SMEs can use the technology that is more suitable, more applicable, more impactful for them, regardless of any type of technology. It should not be limited to e-commerce platform. For example, I know an SMEs that was very helped, very supported by the presence of warehouse startup in rural areas. I also have other friend who's running a business in agriculture, agriculture sector. He was helped by the weather forecast, application of weather forecast. That's also digital transformation. Digital transformation means changing the habit from manual work into the language of machine, any kind of machine, right? And I also have friends who's helped by very much helped by the presence of WhatsApp business account. It's far beyond e-commerce platform, but it's very very practical and very useful for them. Okay, that's first one. The second one, I will go straight to the point. By the end of 2018, as many as 12,000 villages in Indonesia did not have internet access. Maybe this year it is less than that, than those number, of course. But by the end of 2018, 6 of all villages in Indonesia did not have internet access. If we don't address this well, then the speed of digitalization will create more inequality among creative actors and players. The next one, I would like to address the disparity in digital literacy. Just this morning, the Indonesian government launched the National Digital Literacy Program, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong. So the question is, if there is infrastructure for, let's say, internet in the villages, does it mean that the creative actors can utilize it for the good of their business? It's not always the case. For example, we have conducted training on how to, the most simple one, how to use the WhatsApp for marketing, including the WhatsApp business. The participant of the training are SMEs. They said, okay, this is interesting, this is useful. They approve it, but they didn't. Many of them did not follow it up. Why? Because they said they have no time. It's complicated for them, or they don't have resource to keep all the materials updated. So at those level, they can be helped by more simple technology rather than pushing them towards onboarding towards e-commerce platform. Finally, by addressing those aspects, then we can make the digital transformation that is accessible and inclusive for all actors and players. So even if the issue is like this, even if the internet connection is there, it's good, the signal is strong, the creative actors, let's say, they have ideas of how to use it. The question is, can they afford it? Because this question I put forward because a large number of creative economy actors are micro businesses or even individual artisan subcontractor. I'm not sure they can afford. I'm quite convinced that many of them cannot afford regular internet data, high quality data for their internet activities. So perhaps we can revive the idea of cheap community internet at villages and focusing research on open access application that can support the business and creative process of the actors. Even the simple application like recording the financial transaction, weather forecasting, or other simple application rather than pushing them forward, rather than pushing them on board to e-commerce platform. Maybe I will stop there. Pak Rifki, I will leave the rest for discussion. Back to you.
Okay, thank you, Pak Revi, and for sticking to the time. Next, we have Pak Ibra. If Pak Ibra already joined us. Okay, so Pak Ibra will share with us the role of infrastructure, especially in terms of a logistic and how it would enhance the development of MSME and creative economy. So, Pak Ibra, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Pak Rifki. Good afternoon, everyone. It is such a pleasure for me to be here and to share some views on what's happening from logistical point of view regarding the challenges faced by SMEs, not only in Indonesia, but also globally. So the topic I'm going to share with you today is about how the logistical aspect does play important role as a hinder preventing the growth of SMPs during the COVID-19 pandemic. And of course, all of information here is my personal opinion. So as we often see from the news that sometimes government circulated information or update information, which is reflecting something from one side, but not the other side of the coin. So for instance, towards the end of third quarter 2020, for instance, we have been witnessing as if the economy has been rebounding as the current account deficit has been mitigated from as a problem we usually face time by time. But what had happened is far beyond what is informed by government, as basically logistical aspect has been deteriorating since the last couple of months. And the impact will be that the shortage of container has been hampering exports, especially for small and medium enterprises. So the container shortage has been increasing the freight rate dramatically during the last couple of months, and it is becoming one of the reasons why now industry, private sector in Indonesia find it more difficult to send goods for foreign market. And for SME, it's quite apparent, it's quite straightforward. Pak Teten Mas Duki also mentioned that one of the reasons why UMKM, SME, face a lot of turbulence during the pandemic is that the increasing freight rate, increasing transportation costs as much as 30 to 40%. So I'll be going to discuss what is behind this and how would be the mitigation that can be implemented by government and related parties so that we can facilitate rebounding, especially for SME in Indonesia. So as we know that in a logical term, transportations and ships is the intermediaries transporting goods from one point to another. And we call it that ship follow the trade. So this is the first dilemma in the shipping economics, that ships always follow the trade. But unfortunately, during the pandemic, it's just the other way around, that now trade follow the ships. So whenever you still have the space, then your commodities, your cargo can be traded, can be transported out of the country. But if you do not have sufficient cargo, sufficient space in the vessel, then, you know, irrespective of your cargo, you have to be waiting for the next schedule. And as we know, the problem is related to the structure of the industry. Like the global shipping industry has been very much influenced and determined by three major alliances. And when they already introduce something, put in place, then the whole industry will be impacted. Yeah, the global trade will be impacted. As Pak Kiki also mentioned, trade is important. Trade is the source of reserve that can stabilize the healthiness of the economy. But the transportation can be controlled. It's totally market driven. And having said that, you know, when the market is monopolized by this alliance, then we can witness what is called as blank sailing program. Operators reduce the volume, the frequency of operation, and it is impacting the whole landscape of trade globally. So that if we see towards the end of the third quarter of 2020, then everything has been decoupling here and another. Yeah, the typhoon, the lockdown, the containers stranded all over the places, congestion, repositioning. Yeah, when you have empty container, you have to pull them back to your country. It's all facing, it has been facing a lot of trouble. And this is all contributing to why now, when you are discussing with a small medium enterprise, talking about exportation is really, really difficult, as we are facing enormous exorbitant increase in freight rate. So this is the evidence. Yeah, if we look back, the Pacific Ocean steadiness of the rate of the container throughput during the last couple of months, it has dramatically changes during the last couple of months when the freight rate, we call here we presented WCI, freight rate composite, comprising the whole freight rate in all over the globe. It's increasing dramatically. So if we see here, the number of vessel operation declining, we call it supply rationing, so that the supply curve just shift to the left-hand side, increasing, adding the pressure on the freight rate. But on the other hand, we can see that the freight rate has been increasing 30% month by month growth. So if you delay your exportation by now, like 5 months from now, you will expect that the freight rate will be increasing by more than 50%. So, and if you are experiencing small medium enterprise producing, so to speak, low value added product, then the cost of the freight rate will not compensate the value added. Yeah, you sell something like, small or simple handicraft, and you are facing, almost double or triple freight rate, then the value added of your export will not be compensating the freight rate, and that is the reason why the private sector firms find it more difficult to export. And then the impact will be unavoided. Yeah, the export to India increased by almost a factor of 3, 400, 1300, and then from China, usually very extremely cheap, now becoming about 400. Brazil, it's same all over the globe. So if we don't tackle this, then irrespective of the whole framework on middle term, on long term, the triple helix, quadruple helix, we face, the problem is there on the table, that our private sector, small and medium enterprise will find it extremely difficult to do exportation. Let alone if you see the number of rollover, number of cargo waiting to be offloaded, to be unloaded to the vessel, has been increasing in many major ports where our exports should be transiting there before sent to all over the globe. So this is extremely challenging. And then having said that, if we see that the process of logistics in Indonesia is comprising several stages, from the port, tracking, and then terminal handling charge, ocean freight, and then in the destination. You see that the ocean freight itself has been increasing almost uncontrollably. But then, given this, I would say that government should take over and put a more realistic scenario so that the whole logistic cost is not that expensive, but rather 2 weeks ago, instead of reducing the cost, BUMN, Pelindo has decided to increase the terminal handling charge. So, putting much more pressure for the exporters, for the small and medium enterprises, knowing that the export fee has been increasing, but at the same time as well, that terminal handling charge that should be reduced, as the role of the government to Pak Kiki has said, a Keynesian policy is just the opposite. It's the increment and putting more pressure for the companies. So short-term and medium-term policies should be identified. Knowing that we are still very much dependent on regional traders. We export quite a lot of commodities, but maybe we don't know that actually our exports are depending on traders in Singapore. Rubber, in particular, there are a lot of traders in Singapore to connect us as exporters here and the importers in other countries. So if we're still depending on traders, it will be adding up the process and the segment of the supply chain, so that it not be very efficient. The value added of the product will not be enjoyed by exporters, but rather by trader in the middle countries, in the middle of the process of supply chain. So this is what will be the challenge. I understand that I'm talking more about the short-term challenge, but this is on the table and we have to be able to mitigate the problem. Thank you, Mas Rifki, back to you.
Okay. Great, thank you, Pak Ibra, for your fruitful presentation. Next, we have Bu Erika Paula Sioson from ASEAN Secretariat, and she will be talking about the regional context and perspective. So, Bu Erika, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and may I ask my slides to be projected?
Okay, yeah. Yep. Okay.
Can go back to that. Yeah. So, first of all, I echo everyone. Thanking Nicholas and the Global Solutions Initiative. We look forward to the second edition of the book, Intersecting, and hope we can also be a knowledge partner or, if not, a contributor. So basically, we'll be talking about, next slide, please. It's going to be 3 parts, but I'll skip most of the first part because I think we kind of already established the trends in creative economy development in ASEAN. At this point, since already the book most likely have touched on that. So what I'm going to be discussing is a bit on the initial analysis that we did on the creative ecosystem readiness in ASEAN, as well as to give you updates on what we are doing at ASEAN in terms of creative economy and COVID-19 and some other ways forward. Next slide, please. Yes, next slide, please. Okay. So these graphs, you don't really need to focus much on it, but it's basically to show us that in general, we are seeing an expansion of trade in creative goods since UNCTAD started collecting data in 2003. Next slide, please. And in line with the expansion of the world trade in creative goods, ASEAN's trade in creative goods had substantially grown over the period of 2003 to 2015. At this point, we don't have yet unupdated data. So at the average annual growth rate of 11%, we can see that from 2003 to 2015. During this period, creative goods exports from ASEAN increased by 2.5 times. So that is from $9.3 billion in 2002 to $23.5 billion in 2015. Next slide, please. And so what we did was to do an initial analysis of what is the state of the creative ecosystem readiness in ASEAN. We did not really look at all the factors that say impact the creative ecosystem readiness, but rather we focused more on 4 significant factors that we think can really be can be in a way addressed. Or so first, when it comes to on these 4 factors that we looked at, We looked at policy building, which pertains to the institutional frameworks that allow creative entrepreneurs to thrive. And I think this is very much in line with Pak Ricky and Ibu Tita already mentioned earlier. And then second, we looked at sustainable financing, which is a key ingredient of all goods and services, whether they be public or private. And third is digital readiness pertaining to both the physical and technological infrastructure available in the region, as well as skills and use of digital tools. And this goes in line with what Pak Ravindo has mentioned. And finally, clustering pertaining to concentrations of creative makers nationally and regionally. So let's look at all of these one by one, but very briefly. In terms of policy building, what we are seeing in the region is that it's pretty uneven in that in some ASEAN countries, we are seeing that there's already some development. So in some countries in ASEAN, we are seeing that creative economy is already being included in their national strategies, while some are still in the early stages of development. And as a result, have dedicated agencies or institutions that focus on the fostering and promotion of creative industry. So for instance, we can mention Singapore with their Design Council Singapore, or say Thailand, and also Philippines to some extent, and Indonesia, that are pretty much leading this discussion. These agencies can act as one-stop shops for SMEs, providing them information on finance, opportunities, incentives, among others. Among the leading countries, we are seeing two strategies. So either one as inclusion in their national development strategies, or two as a separate, more targeted roadmap. However, discussions as to what constitutes actually creative industries or creative economy becomes kind of a hindrance because it's definite. So really pushing the development of these roadmaps and strategies can be a kind of, a bit hampered. When it comes to sustainable financing, SMCEs in ASEAN continue to rely on a mix of private and public financing. This is because of two things that we are seeing in the literature. First, the general perception of SMEs being high risk for many private financing institutions. And second, SMCEs, specifically in culture and arts, often rely on personal financing and donation. So this can be attributed to the issue of profitability versus creativity and arts. Again, relating to the issue of creativity and say mass consumption or say mass production of creative goods and services. This results to SMCEs in culture and arts sectors specifically to be more likely to self-exclude financially. And in these instances, the government can support by bridging the gap between SMCEs and private sector. Countries with that we are considering leading when it comes to policy building are able to offer various sources of financing, whether as blended or as purely public source of finance. And in terms of digital readiness, I echo what Ravindo has said, and we see that this also remains uneven across the region. Looking at it from a regional perspective, this is uneven, but of course, the story becomes more complicated when we look at more national and local stories. In general, though, in ASEAN, we are seeing that digital connectivity continues to improve. In 2020, a significant proportion of ASEAN citizens first went online and started using digital apps. The fastest growing digital startups are hosted in the region, including, as everyone knows, Lazada, Shopee, Grab, and Gojek. And such platforms do allow entrepreneurs to reach a wider market. And the use of digital financial services in the region is also on the rise, which in turn can make entrepreneurs to sell and receive payments for their goods and services. But this is notwithstanding what Ravindo has mentioned earlier, that another issue is how then can creative entrepreneurs reach this e-commerce platforms, and given the widening digital divide also when it comes to local setting. And finally, when it comes to clustering, we know from the literature why clustering is important. Clusters allow for risks to be distributed, costs to be reduced, and knowledge to be transferred. In the region, we are seeing that clustering is also very much uneven, but states with consolidated national strategies are fostering the development of creative hubs. As mentioned, Singapore, for instance, creative hubs are finding support from private sector, philanthropic networks, and venture capitalists. We are seeing impact investing becoming a source of funding for creative hubs. However, impact investing also still has limited understanding of what creative economy is. And this is because of the industries being in a way both for profit and for social impact. That's why we are seeing more of impact investing coming in there. And lastly, social media platforms become a popular way for creative makers. The popularity of social media platforms and increased digital connectivity in the region have allowed creative makers access to a wider group of audience and break into potential markets. And next slide, please. Yes, and this is my final slide. And just to update everyone what is happening at the regional level. The creative economy is identified as an important sector that requires help for recovery, and at the same time, an important driver to assist the region's recovery. And as such, it has been included in the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework and Implementation Plan. Steps are, we are taking it one step at a time, though ASEAN is very much involved in the international discussion on the pushing. And so ongoing discussion are also present to establish a cross-sectoral ASEAN mechanism for the promotion and development of creative economy. And we are pleased to share that this is being driven by Indonesia. This will help better position the role of creative economy in promoting human and sustainable development. As well as we see that creative economy is really very much in line with existing activities of ASEAN, including the ASEAN Cultural Prevention. The development of creative economy is an important upstream effort to inculcate ASEAN culture prevention to promote well-being and uplift quality of lives of ASEAN people. And finally, when it comes to addressing the fundamental question on what is creative economy, we are seeing there has been, I think many of you already know that while the definition from UNCTAD is there is still not much, consensus of creative economy. And we think that this also hampers how governments address creative economy because of this lack of this consensus on the definition. And so putting in place a metrics to measure the efficacy and value of creative economy sector is very important. And so ASEAN is currently contributing to the global discussion and consensus on the definition of creative economy and evaluation matrix, a metrics that UNCTAD is carrying out. Yes, that is the end of my presentation, and thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Bu Erika, for your presentation and perspective on the regional level. So since we are running late of time, I would like only to address one more question for all of these speakers. So one big question that remains regarding the creative economy and digital infrastructure and the impact of COVID. So what would be next? I mean, going forward, what would be the most pressing issues to solve in terms of developing the potential of creative economy and its enhancement using digital infrastructure? So what would be the short-term agenda of helping the recovery, and in the long term, how this creative economy could support the agenda of sustainability as well? Probably we could start with Pak Riki. Pak Riki, if you have any insights on that. Pak Riki, you're still on mute.
Yes, I think the most important in digital infrastructure, probably we have to see the strategy for the future, how the creative economy, Indonesian creative economy, can tap into opportunity bigger into the digital infrastructure. Probably since the digital infrastructure itself is actually the platform, the business models actually is quite inclusive. I mean, we don't need to rely on our own digital infrastructure in order to tap into the global market actually. So that's what I think we need to do. Probably we need to create bigger incentive for our creative players to tap more bigger into the global digital infrastructure that already established. For example, I think probably we need give more incentive to our film industry player to tap into Netflix, to get more opportunity to be there. And also for the music industry, how they get more opportunity to get benefit from the bigger platform that already exists, like Spotify, or a better deals for the business. So in that case, that we can expect that our creative industry can benefit more from what is already get more pie on the global market that already exists. As well as in the e-commerce, I think the big question always if our own big e-commerce unicorn can accommodate our SME, if they can accommodate the buyer from overseas, I think that will make a bigger opportunity for our creative SME that already there. But you know, like I was the biggest challenge I was compared to this. We as an Indonesian can easily buy anything from Amazon, and they can send it from somewhere in United States or somewhere in Europe to our doors in Indonesia. But can our e-commerce make the buyer from some small city in Europe or America buy some Indonesian product from our e-commerce and we can deliver to their door? Not yet. So if we can make this happen, that's easily will give a greater benefit for our creative industry. So I think that's the major task in how creative economy and digital infrastructure in the future will be. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Pak Ricky, on your insights. I think I would like to continue on opinion from Pak Ibra, since Pak Ricky also mentioned that how we could connect more into the global level playing field. So, Pak Ibra, if you have any comments on that.
Sure. Thank you very much, Mas Rifki. I'm totally. I totally echo what Pak Rifki has mentioned about the better connectivity as. It's not always gloomy. I mean, the example I give to the audience is not always gloomy, as we also experience sparkling phenomenon. Yeah, during the peak of pandemic last year, we had. We are a logistic company. We had a request from the Netherlands, Pak Ricky, to send handicraft from Bali, and then when we tell them apologize, but the freight rate is like 4 times. No problem, we will pay the freight rates. So when we can position our product outside with the niche market, a clear niche market that can absorb our product, so that it needs collaboration from MOF, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, with the trade attaché that we had in foreign countries, then actually we still can channel our product outside. We can exemplify with some cases we had during the peak of the pandemic. Even the freight rate has been increasing by 4 times, 5 times. Still, they demand the handicraft from Bali to be sent to the Dutch. It's not only once, it's not only twice, it's very often. But if you think about lower or middle value-added product, then that's a problem, as the demand is not is less elastic. It's just common product that can be substituted with other product from other countries. So totally agree. When not only e-commerce platform, but not only e-commerce platform, but if we have also a strong logistic companies that can bring your goods from one point to another, not necessarily e-commerce, then basically we can keep the value added of Indonesian exports. Don't forget, 25% of our current account deficit is attributed to transportation, to good transportation. So once we can handle the problem of logistic, then actually we can kind of solve 25% of the homework if we are talking about CA deficit, as Pak Kiki also mentioned in the previous session.
Okay. Thank you, Pak Ibra. That's such a splendid insights, especially you touch upon on the aspect of a value chain and global value chain. I think I would like to have the insights from Pak Revindo regarding how we could integrate better into a global value chain, especially when we talk about the case of our MSMEs. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Pak Rifki. Maybe it doesn't address directly your question, but I just have two additional comments, maybe my final remarks. First, we need a digital ecosystem at the village level. The village government, they have the money, but they need direction on how to improve the local business, right? The second one, we need an incentive, I don't know, maybe fiscal or a non-fiscal incentive for transportation and logistic companies and startup who have the orientation to ship or to transport or to send the goods from rural areas to the urban areas, or from outside Java to Java, or from SMEs in remote areas. For example, I appreciate PT KAI and Damri who dedicate some compartments for cheap transportation, transporting the commodities from rural areas to urban areas. That we want to see more of that kind of initiative. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pak Revindo. And I also would like to get insights from Erica regarding how we could integrate our regions better, especially in a smooth way that we could actually have a better connection and also that could benefits all.
Yes, thank you very much for the question. This is a very challenging question because as we know already from ASEAN, the discussion on creative economy is proceeding at different pace. But what we are seeing is that there should be more recognition and more discussion happening on creative local players, entrepreneurs, and practitioners for there to have ownership. And when we have ownership, it's more likely going to be a sustainable endeavor. What we are also, I think, seeing is that we need more capacity building, especially at the local level. But this capacity building activity should be rooted at what actually the local entrepreneurs need, not simply as a top-down approach. And this is where the ASEAN culture of prevention, more on the upstream approach, comes in. So what we think here is that we can look at some similar experiences, especially, for instance, the Taobao village in China, if you're familiar with that. It's kind of like a very local, how do you say it? To bring inclusion, to bring inclusive development to local villages. But this has been driven more by, say, so that is one kind of model that we can look at. But of course, creative economy requires more exploration and more experimentation on what kind of approaches we can take. But yeah, so what we are seeing is that there should be more discussion on both local and regional level.
Okay, thank you, Erica. Probably I would like to have a final opinion, last but not least, on Butita. So we've talked about on the global and regional perspective about the creative economy. What would be your take regarding our core at our domestic level is the bottleneck of this creative economy, and how could we proceed forward to solve the most pressing issues in your opinion?
Yeah, thank you. Well, my viewpoints now maybe from the community viewpoints, which are a lot of stakeholders from different backgrounds. And if you were mentioning about the short-term plan, like was asked to Pariki, I think the most realistic one is to really get the economy going at the local level. And we have been doing this effort. For example, we have this so-called borongdong.id for West Java government, which is like a commerce platform, but those who become customers are only government employers, so ASN. That's because their salary is the most stable during the pandemic, so there's no reduction of salary or anything. So in income, they're actually the most stable. So that's why we are also buying Borongdong is at the for the local brand, and we don't disturb the other e-commerce because stuff at Borongdong is coming from the things that are stuck in the warehouse and so on. And in this sense, a lot of transaction has been going on, and even the province of Bali is getting into this as well. So this kind of thing to get the local economy going is actually what can survive. And another thing is value creation, that actually adding value or creating value to so-called ordinary products or fashion or services, because we know that a lot of products from especially the rural areas, they need a bit of not only a touch-up, but really a deep research on how would you treat a material to make it really competent and to make it really competitive compared to other similar products, for example, compared to other Asian countries or other natural materials and so on. So this kind of research, this kind of reskilling and upskilling in either craftsmen or in the labs of campuses and so on to make competitive products is actually what we need right now. So at least if you talk about short term within the next 2 to 5 years, that's the most that we can do right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Butita. So that marks the end of our discussion on the second session of today's webinar. This has been a very fruitful discussion, and unfortunately, the time is short on our side. So I would like to thank you for all the fantastic speakers in this session, Pak Ricky, Butita, Pak Revindo, Pak Ibra, and Bu Erika. That has been a fruitful discussion and a marvelous session. So now I return the stage to Sean. Sean, back to you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Rifki. Before proceeding further, we would like to invite Mr. Rifki and all of the speakers to open their camera for the group photo session. So, Pak Fahmi, can you please?
Okay, sudah Mas.
Okay. Thanks a lot for Mr. Rifki and all of the speakers of the second session. We will now proceed directly to the last session of this webinar. That is the cross-border data management and regional value chain. So the session will last about around 40 minutes and will provide opportunities for speakers to share about cross-border data management policies and the role of regional cooperation in strengthening the regional value chains. For that, I would like to re-invite Mr. Jahen Reski, the chair of the session, to the stage. Mr. Jahen Reski, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Sean. Just to make sure, 30 minutes or 40 minutes, Sean?
I think it is. It
doesn't matter. Let's just yeah, okay, that's okay. Maybe Buatu will stop when she thinks it's time to stop.
I think we should keep it as fast as possible if you can.
All right, so probably 30 minutes at maximum. Okay, so thanks, Sean. Good afternoon again, everyone. So back with me again. So I will be the moderator for the last session. And as Sean mentioned before, we are talking about cross-border data management and regional value chain. I'm not gonna introduce so many things before, so I think I will just introduce the speakers for today's session. We have 3 speakers. The first one is Ibu Riatu Kipia. Ibu Riatu is the director of LPM. She also a lecturer at LPM and also accompanied by Rifki. Rifki is also a researcher at LPM FEBUI. And also we have the last speaker, Ibu Fauzia Sen. Ibu Fauzia is the senior economist at AREA, and also Ibu Fauzia she was my lecturer at FEBUI, and she's still a lecturer at FEBUI. So I think without wasting too much time, I will give the Zoom floors to Ibu Riatu or Rifki that will present their presentations. Silakan, Ibu.
Thank you, Jahen. I hope we are not tired yet. Okay. From LPM, thank you from JSI, Nicola, for inviting us to contribute in this intersecting book. Also from my colleague here, Rifki, that joined us for this contribution. From LPM is actually our views. We are seeing here in the context of a pandemic, despite that there are worsening condition on health, and also in the case of social and economic, we see also effort from communities, from private, and also from governments. So it is an upside in the case of data management. There are many initiatives, ease of access data, not only on the global context, but also within the country itself. So in the case of Indonesia, next, before the pandemic, maybe we are not seeing much of a complete data from the crisis, even when we are experiencing the 1998 economic crisis. We have no available data, and there are no like today, no extensive initiative in collections and also in sharing the data to general public. Yet in this period, the last 1.5 years, not only driven by developed countries, not only driven by a strong multilateral or international organization, but also within the country itself. In Indonesia, we see like government explaining and sharing, opening more of their data, not only at the central level, but also at the provincial and the local level. The last session, previous session, Tita has also mentioned about the initiative from civil society. We see now also across, I think it is interesting to see website from provincial level, also on local level, not only addressing on how is actually COVID-19 data, but also issuing on the program itself. So on Bansos, on opening data on public expenditures, we have not seen this. They are compiled data generally conducted by CBS or Ministry of Finance, but it is seldom by conducted at the local or at the provincial level. So it is an interesting movement, and we see also from research centers in the early outbreak in Indonesia. We see initiative from CSIS, for example, on knowledge sharing and also collecting early data or early discussion on the issue, giving feedback on policy making as well. But we see that going forward, it is still not optimal given the scale of the crisis itself. So, and the limitation of the data is still persistent, especially in emerging country like Indonesia, especially when we discuss like in the second session, when we discuss new program, then the government or the government institution may not have a complete data itself. For example, support on creative industry. The data, the availability of data, especially from the informal sector, are still limited. So that's why we need more coordinated, maybe it is also more operational in the context of bottom-up initiative and also collected as well at the central government level. Going forward, we see that the efficacy of government program implementation also depends on this data management. So it we issue from LPM, we issue a book on Build Back Better, responding on COVID-19, and our recommendation is better provision on accurate data. So this time, like when we have crisis 1998, it's also initiative of social spending come from that more focusing targeting or on poor population, and the case of current situation also is a policy window to actually assessing the program better targeted, better provision and accurate data for better target and planning, improving as well the system, not only from the government side. Maybe this is also escalating the role of potential contributors other than government program. For example, in the case of climate change, for sure it's not only the contributors from government, but also from stakeholder, private sectors, and community. And therefore, we need to make investment in monitoring and evaluation system, but not making it burdensome. So we need to see, to map what are the important things here, and going forward to that, I think the case of regional cooperations, as mentioned in last session on SME, can also use in this context. Next. So here we thought that initiative on data management in the regional level is the potential to go. In the case of G20, for example, it is already an initiative on taxation information exchange, and current conditions, fiscal policies needs to be also coordinated. They are also need to be evaluated. Not only the data should only be available not within the government itself, but also to wider public as part of accountability. So expanding the initiative of data management at the regional level, it can help also ASEAN member to benchmark. So there are countries that are already good in that, and it can be benchmarked and also foster cooperation. If we know we know our neighbors by knowing their data itself. Right. So, and cross-border data management within ASEAN started maybe quite expand in terms of trade data, but not in the case of like crisis management. Although in Keynote, we also hear about commitment on ASEAN COVID-19 economic recovery commitment. I think this is a start. So cross-border data governance will also need to be discussed to increase transparency and accountability for the organization. In this context, I think ASEAN has the potential to enforcing cross-data governance. ASEAN can facilitate these things. This is an issue on the resource and knowledge sharing in terms of data management. Any constraint regarding data management should be reviewed in order to increase the availability across the countries. And better data governance both in country scope and region scope will help each economies to be well prepared when there is not a crisis of sudden shock. I think that is summary of on the case of cross-border data management. Maybe in the context of EU, it already quite advanced, but not yet on other regional level. Rifki?
Okay, yeah. Okay, so everyone can hear me? Yes, I hope so. Okay, and thank you, Bang Jahan, for your warm introduction, and thank you for the invitation to be part of this panel. This is such an honorable opportunity to share the stage with two of my teachers back in undergrad, Buriatu in public finance and Bufao in public policy. So I would like to pick up from where Buriatu left off. Well, she has perfectly highlighted the importance of data management, especially on a regional level. And to take the discussion further, I would like to address one germane example of the cross-border data use, which is on the trade context. So cross-border data management within ASEAN, such as data for trade, may provide a suitable tools for arranging economic recovery strategies. And furthermore, cross-border data governance will also increase the transparency and accountabilities for organization and business decisions. So on this term, ASEAN may use the availability of cross-border data to increase the cooperation and integration effort between the countries through certain policies. For example, the data that might be used to build a firm economic and business framework to enhance the integration in terms of supply chain through regional value chains development. So in terms of trade, this will benefit ASEAN countries since most countries in ASEAN have higher trade volume intra-ASEAN rather than with other trading partners. In addition, since the trade integration within ASEAN is relatively intense, better data monitor could provide a potential disruption mapping of which cities or areas within ASEAN. In the case that, for example, one manufacturer in ASEAN cities is being disrupted or being bankrupt. With that, a better data integration and monitoring intra-ASEAN would provide a better insights. And also, a better data integration and monitoring intra-ASEAN would also provide a better opportunity for us to track the recovery of COVID-19. Also, any other potential future shock. And also, to integrate the cities across ASEAN region into a comprehensive and solid value chain, I think the development of cities also towards a more sustainable urbanization model is also crucial. One way to achieve this change is by pursuing the agenda of smart cities. Judging from the existing trend, most cities in Indonesia are experiencing rapid development, which consequently cause inadequate infrastructure problem, as the growth rate of infrastructure simply not matched with the growth rate of economics. And the new developments are taking place also in the suburbs area, are called suburbanization, and depend on the activities of the city center. So suburbanization has resulted in a more densely populated suburbs, where the population and vehicles are experiencing rapid growth without being matched by the improvement in transport infrastructure. So as a result, travel from the suburbs to the city center has increased, as well as housing demands. And this condition makes local government struggle to provide local public transportation service and develop new network. And one way to control this urban sprawl is to prioritize transit. Of course, with all its merit and flaws, Singapore provides one of the most reliable public transportation system in Southeast Asia through an extensive network of MRT, LRT buses that are comfortable, modern, safe, clean, easy to use, reliable, punctual, and well integrated. And this could serve as a benchmark on a certain merit to other countries in ASEAN. And next. Okay, yeah. On a regional level, a more suitable development planning is also needed to push the agenda of regional integration towards a more sustainable and benefits all coordination. And one potential step to integrate ASEAN countries is to enhance the connectivity between, for example, specific city or provinces of one country across the Asian region, such that it creates a stronger regional value chain. And the regional value chain built by the chain of certain cities or provinces across ASEAN will aim to empower each part of the value chain by complementing each other's advantage in terms of labor skills, input provisions, and supporting facilities. However, several factors need to take place to ensure that the creation of regional value chains not only comes to a realization, but also creates a mutual benefit among parties. So what needs to be done? Firstly, we think that institutional coordination on a multi-government context in which the central and subnational level are able to accommodate and implement the agenda. So involvement at the early phase of subnational level government by the central government to reflect ownership, for example, on a roadmap, referring to province or cities that could be developed to fit a certain regional value chain. And second, prioritizing cities with a relatively small, similar stage of development. In addition, national government could provide support in terms of capacity building, technical and financial support to build a required expertise and know-how of subnational institutions. So I think I would stop there, and I will give the floor back to Bang Jahan.
Okay, thanks Bu Rianto and Pak Rifki for your insights about data management and also how it could help us to improve or enhance digital value chains. So I think we can go to the next speaker, Ibu Fauzia Zain. Ibu Fauzia will also provide her views about data management and also regional value chain. And I think Ibu Fauzia has her own presentation. Could you share your screen, Bu, or do you need some help?
I'll do by myself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, silakan Ibu.
Yeah, thank you very much for LPM and GSI for having me here. Because of the time limitations, I will be very brief and I will share only one message here, focus only in one message. I'd like to ask your attentions on the importance of having a reliable and updated data on rural-urban connectivity and living facilities and amenities, both at national levels and regional levels. Let me briefly explain it here. If we talk about ASEAN cross-border data, trade is the most well-developed data. Already shared, already updated, and used. Yeah. Some data in socio-economic as well. Coverage is all quite a majority of the ASEAN member states. But if we talk about the urban, not alone to mention rural connectivities and living conditions, it's less recorded, less shared, and less utilized. And why is it important? Because it is us. Yeah. Some of us are living in cities. Some of our families, our country fellows, are living in villages, in rural areas. Rapid urbanizations has been happening and continuously happening. Yeah. 4 of these ASEAN member states have more than 40% of population living in urban area. Another 4 have less than 40%, showing our diversity in ASEAN. So during normal situations, pre-pandemic time, the issues of the urban and rural gaps, quite left behind. Yeah. The issues of urban usually or typically occupied by some nice jargons like let's have smart cities, etc. Of course, it's important, but it's not the whole story. It's not a complete story. This actually we have been facing the issues of the digital divide, digital infrastructure, transportation, poor access of connectivity, and poor access and quality of electricity, water, sanitations, and hygienes. Yeah, many years, yeah, and it becomes worse now during the pandemic because the development paths usually tend to favor urban rather than rural areas. So a little bit move behind it that we could see that some urbanization problems are created by unsolved problems in rural areas, because the rural areas face the disadvantages because of its remoteness, yeah, from the market. They have labor market have limited job options, poor quality of educations and healthcare services, and also usually low quality of the various services provided by both public and private sectors. So, and pandemic is here. It pushed us to realize the importance of connectivity, that we are in the state of lacking a good connectivity, a smooth connectivity. We have a severe effect of disruptions because of disruptions. The spread of pandemic because of the movement of the people, as well as the poor living situations in the slum areas, etc. And the huge challenge in providing the health care. Yeah. Some migrant workers, yeah, in Thailand left Thailand and get back to their home countries in Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar because of this pandemic, adding more burden in the areas, especially in the rural areas. Yeah. Also, some urban poor, yeah, get back to their hometown, yeah, resort to the traditional sectors, agriculture, yeah, and also fisheries, perhaps, and rely on the social capital in rural areas, and as well, again, adding the burden to the less developed areas, and also some villagers, yeah, go to the cities because of the patients in the rural situations. So how we can extend the outreach, how we know where are they, what kind of the right support for them, how we can address current issues, yeah, pandemic and the economic severs, and at the same time reach the long-term objective. I put all the answers as data, yeah, but actually it's not, I'm not saying that the data is the only thing we need, but of course we need capacity institutions, a good institution, capacity, money, fundings, etc. But your effort could be wasted if you don't have a good and reliable data. We show it already for many years. So I guess that's this time the pandemic really wake us up, really wake up. Then look at this, the importance of data, to revisit the rural urban development agenda, and so my message is that, yeah, country needs to have the synergized rural urban development at national level and scale up to the regional level, to the ASEAN level. So it brings us to my first message, yeah, the importance of having a reliable and updated urban-rural connectivity, living facilities and amenities data, yeah, both in national level and regional level. So that's my message. Thank you very much for your attention. I give back to Jahen.
Thank you, Bu Pao, for your views about the importance of data. So, I mean, if you have a look on Twitter, we have the data from BPJS Kesehatan just breached. So, so there's a problem with our own data. So I think what would be the challenge to ensure this commitment? Because we've seen in EU GDPR, I think Buriatu or Rifki mentioned in their presentation. I mean, we need some commitment from Asian countries. Also, looking back at Pak Yose suggestion that we have strong commitment between Asian countries. What would be the challenge to ensure that all countries will commit to do this data measurement? So I think if anyone of the speakers has any views on it, Riyatu or Mufau.
I'll have a response. Yes, brief response. It's rely on first that the focus or priority of the national, because the data requires a lot of efforts and funding. Yeah, we know that in ASEAN member states we have quite diverse situations in economics and also capacity. That's why we in area always support the capacity building for our fellows, especially in Mekong areas as well. So first, even though they would like to do so, but they are limited by the situations, yeah, the capacity, etc. And second, we still need to work on the standards. What kind of data that can be comparable across the countries. So the researchers, the policymakers can have a maximum utilization of the data. And I think that the other international institution like OECD as well as the banks support there. But yeah, of course, there are many things need to do. So that's perhaps my response. Thank you, Jahen.
From Watu or Vicky, any comments on that?
No? Okay, probably Bu Atu want to go first.
Okay. Yeah, I think we have a benchmark like EU on GDPR and also on OECD. Maybe area also I think has conduct many initiative on data or because on in the context of cross-border data management, we need also to assess constraint given the institutional context, right? And also the regulatory, usually like what ASEAN experience on trade data, they are streamlining. Also, it is also part of structural reform, I think, in that sense. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe Nicola can also share what EU experience given also non-uniformity or like variation also across the countries itself. Yeah.
All right, Nicola, do you want to add or Rifki?
No, I will address this point in the closing remarks.
In the closing remark. Okay, great. Rifki, do you want to?
Okay, I would like to add a just a little things regarding on this the importance of data collection and management. So Bu Fau and Bu Riatu already highlighted how important it is, and I would just like to extend on that part, especially on the macro perspective. So we have to realize that Indonesia is a developing country with a very limited fiscal space, meaning that we don't actually have a broad tax base to fund our spending, and also it connects to the point of Bu Fau. We cannot have to have a stimulus that goes into waste just because we don't have a clear data on that. So and also we don't also have the luxury to increase our debt substantially like developed countries. So it means that we need the data. We need to rely on a good data more than other countries in a certain sense. So we need data to have a more a revenue in terms of tax, and we also need a better data to make our stimulus and our spending way more efficient, and that could only be achieved with data. Not only with data, but it's a crucial part. Just to echo what Bu Fau has said. So I think the COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted those issues further. And I think we need to take a more serious step towards addressing the data issues in Indonesia and other developing countries, especially in ASEAN region. So that would be all my points, Bang Jahen. Thank you.
Thank you, Bu Watu, Pak Rifki, and then also Bu Fau. So I think there's so many things that need to be discussed, but I think because of some time limitation, and we have to stop here because we still have a closing remark, and then also. Yeah, I think we can discuss later on in the next meeting, if any. So I think I want to thank Ibu Riyatu, Pak Rifki, and then Bu Pao for their views on this particular topic. And also want to thank the audience that have been staying with us for the past 2.5 hours, I think 3 hours. Thanks for joining us. I hope it will give some perspective or views about what would be Indonesia's role in the next G20 or G20 meetings, and then we can accommodate more views later on. So thanks Bu Atu, Pak Rifki, and then Bu Pao. Thanks for your time and your views. I will give it back to Pak Shan. Over to you, Shan.
Thank you, Mr. Jahan, and all of the speakers, as well as the discussants of the last session. It's been an enlightening discussion. So I would like to invite Pak Jahan and all of the speakers to open their camera for the group photo session. So please, Pak Fahmi, if you could assist us with the group photo.
1, 2, 3, go.
Okay.
Okay, done, Mas.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. So we have now come to the end of today's webinar, and we would like to invite Sir Nicholas Bushu, Global Solutions Fellow and President of the Grand Paris Alliance for Metropolitan Development, to deliver his closing remarks. Mr. Bushu, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. And so we have reached the end of a very substantial conversation today. While I wish really to thank all panelists and LPM, FEB, UI to organize this meeting, I would also like to insist very quickly in 2-3 minutes on a few points that came to my mind while listening the conversation. First, what we can see in just this discussion is that we are still far from achieving complete intersections between key issues, especially on the one hand, macroeconomic issues that were shared by Vice Minister of Finance Nazara and Pak Rizal, and other aspects of changes that are triggered by the COVID-19 crisis. Social issues, societal issues, environmental perspectives. What we can see is that key messages that have been shared at the opening were mostly about growth and budget balance, whereas we can see, I would say, practically from the rest of the conversation, that there are a couple of other key factors that need to be taken into account for a successful recovery. However, one very important message that was also passed on in the opening was the key role of national budget support to meet the crisis, and the fact that there is currently a lot of debt creation to tackle a number of economic drops. And I think we have to continue working on how to connect, I would say, the core macroeconomics with other issues, which are about connecting to simplify people and those macroeconomic agendas, which was maybe not done sufficiently or properly in the urgency of addressing previous crises, especially the previous global financial crisis. An important feature that was also mentioned in the opening of our conversation was that the banking system has not collapsed. And that's true, the global banking system has not collapsed despite different aspects of the crisis. But yet, with the intense monetary creation which is happening at all corners of the world, a key question now is who will really benefit from this creation of new monetary units, how this will help really leverage substantial changes in infrastructure systems. How will this help address social inclusion challenges? How would this help mobilize or go through infrastructure, the informal economy and reach out to MSMEs, right? These are questions which are still pending. I think it was quite important also when Nella, for instance, and Jose Rizal exposed the complete policy frameworks of the G20 and insisting on the opportunities to join in. I think this is very, very important, and addressing domestic institutions, research organizations, etc., in the Indonesian context will be a key factor. However, it was also exposed the fragilities of a number of institutional mechanisms, and the more you get at the multilateral stage, the more this question is raised and is important. So I think it's not sufficient to say there is the kind of multilateral agenda which would be the G20 or the G2030 agenda, etc. A key question very much arises about how concretely those agendas can be strengthened, not for the sake of strengthening agendas, because what we believe they can help deliver more sustainable livelihoods and more inclusive living conditions, I would say, on the ground. And every single way to reconnect or resynchronize large-scale investments and sustainable development will be extremely important, with, again, informal economy, but the connections between rural and metropolitan environments being extremely important. In that regard, the issue links with creative economy are extremely important. And I think Ricky mentioned the fact that Indonesia was a forerunner globally in pushing this creative economy agenda. But at this moment, with the disruptions caused by the COVID-19 crisis and the losses in the economy, not to mention the losses of lives, this creative economy agenda and the World Conference on Creative Economy, etc., they are a little bit floating around, and there is no longer a clear direction. So I'm very grateful that ASEAN, for example, is considering very seriously how to include creative economy as part of an ASEAN-wide COVID-19 recovery framework, right? Which could include other aspects of economical changes, such as circular economy. But the work, clearly here, we can see that there is some understanding, but the work is still very much ahead. And if this is not achieved now, I personally doubt that it can be easily achieved before any time soon. Those aspects of regional strength in pushing for innovative recovery solutions are to me extremely important. There is the local dimension and national dimension. There is the global dimension and multilateral dimension, and the regional dimension should absolutely not be underestimated. And especially in the context of the G20 Indonesia, I could only very strongly, modestly, but strongly advise or recommend that the leadership that Indonesia took worldwide, especially in partnership with Latin American countries, a model of South-South and triangular cooperation with the World Conference on Creative Economy and the Orange Economy, to be revived as part of some key inputs or outputs of the G20 Indonesia. And my last comment would therefore be about how much a G20 in the context of the crisis and in the context of Indonesia, with all the issues that were very much sort of highlighted clearly during the different session in the opening segment about Indonesia itself, can benefit from converging efforts region-wide in the ASEAN context and beyond. So here would be my couple of comments. Just a very last thing to mention, that there will be the Global Solutions Summit next week, May 27, 28. You can easily find the registration link, and it's open on the internet. I put it on the chat of the Zoom. And with that, I would like now to leave the floor to Riatu and to Nella, with whom we have prepared this session, and thanking again greatly for making it possible and inviting contributors, also members in the public, to consider if they would like to join in the second edition, although there is just a little bit of time ahead. Thank you very much again.
Thank you, Mr. Bushu. Now we would like to invite Ibu Riatu Mariatul-Kiptia, PhD, Director at the Institute for Economics and Social Research, LPM FEB, to deliver her concluding remarks. Ibu Riatu, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Nicola, also from how it actually we need to focus more on taking potential of G20 cooperation and make it sustain and can be implemented and benefit Indonesia. I think the case of strengthening SME and creative economy is a start, especially from the keynote as well, that we need to focus also on long-term human capital investment. Of course, enhancing or improving SME, it needs to be aligned with human capital investment as well. And ASEAN also, I think G20 already has an example of how G20 through OECD can actually make a long-term commitment in terms of long-term implementation in terms of infrastructures, as well as in the case of fiscal coordination through OECD. Here is still like behind in the case of the ASEAN, maybe on the case of creative economy, and the data cross-border data management. ASEAN already experienced in context of trade data, but we need more on in the context of current economic recovery, especially as many emerging countries also will face fiscal consolidations and need to rethink about the revenue side of the government with the expanding social program, and also risks of to adapt and more resilience on future crises. And also at the end, on behalf of LPM, we also thank you, the University of Indonesia, Faculty of Economics, and our network, Nicola from JSI, Ibu Nela, Pak Yose, Pak Riki, and Butita, and also Bafau to actually share their insight. And I think sharing knowledge, more discussion about current economic condition and social needs that need to be tackled together is also an important issue. Thank you.
Thank you for your closing remarks. Next up, we would also like to invite Ibu Nela. Ibu Nela, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Pak Sen. Okay, I think most of the key points, key takeaway already mentioned by Nicholas and Ibu Riatu. So I just touch on the multilateral aspect. So we know that from discussion, from the summary, that especially in this COVID-19, a lot of countries have priorities how to boost their economic recovery. And then, like Pak Jose mentioned, that it's not that easy, I mean, to push that priority, and then cooperation with other countries, because there's lack of trust among countries, so the main obstacles. So I think with this G20, we can push that our common interest into the multilateral agreement, multilateral solution rather than bilateral solution. Because, you know, if we are in the bilateral solution, usually countries, advanced countries with a lot of capacity, negotiation, even in the knowledge, they have a better position. But if multilateral, we can have that our win-win solution for that. So I think we can take advantage for this G20. And then I want to have input for Indonesia itself. I mean, I take liberty because I'm Indonesian, that, you know, I believe all academia, all think tanks and civil society in Indonesia now, we know all the problem. I think that is better that to put it together, and then we can like formalize that. And because Indonesia will be a presidency next year, that Indonesia have more opportunity to take lead for negotiation in the world. So when we bring our priorities and we try to solve that globally, this will be like easier to push that together. And then in terms of creative economy, I see from the presentation there's many interesting aspects, but the solution seems, I think, not integrated yet, and there are some, maybe we call it a blind spot, or maybe a lot of room for improvement. So I think there are coherent discussion on creative economy, bring both local, national, and regional players are needed to have the policymakers to develop more consolidated strategies. And I saw a question that how to connect that with the growth, how to measure that, so we can have like accurate estimation, accurate calculation, and we can. I think we can bring the international to think about that, and we can create like international guidance, international standard for that. And then I just want to add one for data collection. You know, yes, in the world there's a standard for data collection, and there's some IOs to collect that. But you know, in G20 we have this data gaps initiative. We also have this collection standard for macro data from IMF, World Bank. So there's always open opportunity, I mean, to create another data platform. I think the infrastructure data also been negotiated in the G20. So if we think there's another data measurement we need, especially for the COVID-19 or several aspects, we can raise that to the G20. And maybe, yeah, I mean, because I think Pak Rifki mentioned that we don't have, developing countries maybe not have enough funding. So from G20 can mandate international organization or create another hub to do that. So this will reduce the cost to developing countries. So there's always opportunity for us to improve our data and regional or global data in many aspects. I think, oh yeah, and then I thank you for Nicholas. I thank you, Fakultas Ekonomi and Business in the University of Indonesia, and then all partners and all other things. Thanks, Pak Jose, and then all my long friend that we have all the discussion before. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ibu Nela, for your concluding remarks. That marks the end of our webinar today. We would like to thank all speakers, all chairs for bringing us a very enlightening webinar and fresh knowledge on the current issues and the role that Indonesia will play in the future G20. We would like to convey our gratitude to all the guests and webinar participants for attending the webinar. We also convey our deepest apology for any mistakes and or inconvenience caused during the webinar. We hope we have gained a valuable wisdom in today's webinar for future policymaking and academic discussion. Thank you very much and have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you,
everyone. Thank you, everybody. Terima kasih. Terima kasih, Yatu.
Thank you, Bapak Ibu.
Yatu. Hi, Nicholas.
Ya juga. And also thank you to Nicola.
Yeah.
Congratulations again.
Thank you, Pak Sen. Thank you, Pak Rifki. Okay.
Thank you, Bu Nela.
Mohon izin dulu ya.
Thank you, Bapak Ibu.
Ya, Mafau juga ya. Ibra, thank you Ibra.
Mas Ibra kayaknya udah hilang nih, Bu.
Oke, thank you semua, Mas.
Iya, makasih Mas Fahmi, makasih Mas Ibra.
Mohon maaf ditinggal sholat tadi, terima kasih.
Oh,
Mas Rifki. Terima kasih semuanya.
Thank you, Pak Ibra.
Shan, thank you, Shan.
Thank you, mantap.
Thank you.
Saya close ya, Mas.